Good evening. My name is Sean Sullivan. I'm a member of the Defense Nuclear Facilities Safety Board, and I will preside as chair over this public hearing. The open meeting portion of this proceeding has been postponed due to the unavailability of board member Mr. Daniel Santos, who for health reasons could not be present today. As a result, we have only 2 board members present, and by law, we must have 3 in order to have a meeting. I would like to introduce my colleague on the safety board who is here, Ms. Jessie Roberson, the board's vice chair. The board also has 2 new members, Mr. Bruce Hamilton and Chairman Joyce Connery, both of whom will not be here this evening. We 5 constitute the board. The board's acting general counsel, Mr. John Batherson, is seated to my left. Several members of the board's staff closely associated with the oversight of the Department of Energy's defense nuclear facilities at the Hanford site are also here. Seated at the table to my far right is Dr. Dan Bullen, the senior member of the board's technical staff that is here this evening. Let me now proceed to explain why the board chose to hold this public hearing concerning safety culture at the Waste Treatment and Immobilization Plant, or WTP. The hearing will address safety culture at the Department of Energy's defense nuclear facilities and the board's recommendation 2011-1, which was titled Safety Culture at the Waste Treatment and Immobilization Plant. In this hearing, the board will receive testimony from the director of DOE's Independent Oversight Organization, who will discuss his perspective on the WTP independent safety culture assessments that have been conducted. The board will also receive testimony from the line managers in the Department of Energy's Office of Environmental Management, who are directly responsible for the safe construction and operation of the WTP project. They will discuss actions taken to strengthen and sustain a healthy safety culture at WTP and to assess the effectiveness of improvements and the expectations for further progress. The focus of this hearing is on DOE's effort to improve safety culture at WTP. Some discussion of DOE's efforts to improve safety culture at other sites is expected here this evening, but actions at other sites is not intended to be a focus of this hearing, nor do we intend to focus on the safety culture in other organizations working here at the Hanford site outside of the WTP project. The board will then receive testimony from Dr. Bullen, the senior board technical staff employee here tonight, concerning the board's staff's perspective on the status of DOE's execution of the implementation plan for board recommendation 2011-1, corrective actions taken in response to the board recommendation 2011-1, and the results of the extent of condition reviews conducted by the Department of Energy. Today's hearing was publicly noticed in the Federal Register on July 27, 2015, in order to provide timely and accurate information concerning the board's public and worker health and safety mission throughout DOE's defense nuclear complex. The board is recording this proceeding and hearing through a verbatim transcript, video recording, and live video streaming. The transcript, associated documents, public notice, and video recording will be available for viewing in our public reading room in Washington, D.C. In addition, an archived copy of the video recording will be available through our website for at least 60 days. Per the board's practice, and as stated in the Federal Register notice, we will welcome comments from interested members of the public at approximately 7 p.m. A list of those speakers who have contacted the board is posted at the entrance to the room. We have generally listed the speakers in the order in which they contacted us, or, if possible, when they wish to speak. I will call the speakers in this order and ask the speakers state their name and the title at the beginning of their presentation. There's also a table at the entrance to this room with a sign-up sheet for members of the public who wish to make a presentation but did not have an opportunity to notify us ahead of time. They will follow those who have already registered with us in the order in which they sign up. To give everyone wishing to make a presentation an equal opportunity, we will ask speakers to limit their original presentation to 5 minutes. As presiding chair, we'll then give consideration for additional comments should time permit. Presentations should be limited to comments, technical information, or data concerning the subject of this public hearing. The board members may question anyone making a presentation to the extent deemed appropriate. The record of this hearing will remain open until September 28, 2015. Till this date, members of the public, including those observing today's hearing live via video streaming, may submit a written statement to the board to be included in the record. Contact information for submitting a statement is available on the board's website at dnfsb.gov. I would like to reiterate that the board reserves its right to further schedule and regulate the course of any hearing, to recess, reconvene, postpone, or adjourn any proceeding, and to otherwise exercise its authority under the Atomic Energy Act of 1954 as amended. This concludes my opening remarks, and I will now turn to Ms. Roberson to see if she has any opening remarks.
I don't have any opening remarks, Mr. Sullivan.
Okay, thank you. At this time, I would like to begin the hearing by inviting the panel of witnesses to the witness table. First panel member is Mr. Glenn Podonsky, the Director of DOE's Office of Enterprise Assessments. Second panel member is Mr. Mark Whitney, the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for Environmental Management. Third panel member is Mr. Kevin Smith, the Manager of DOE's Office of River Protection. And the fourth panel member is Mr. William Hamill, the Federal Project Director for the WTP project. We have set aside a total of 10 minutes for opening statements by the panel members. If any panel members choose to provide copies, the board will accept written statements for the public record. So, gentlemen, as you take your seats, before we hear the opening oral statements, does anyone on the panel wish to submit a written statement? No? Seeing none. After the oral statements, the board will then question the panel members. After the panelists to whom a question is directed, other panelists may seek recognition by the chair to supplement the answers as necessary. If the panelists would like to take a question for the record, the answer to that question will be entered into the record of the hearing at a later time. Okay, at this time, I would like to ask, we said 10 minutes, and I think we left it to you gentlemen to figure out how that would be divided. So whoever's going to go first, Mr. Podonsky, Mr. Whitney.
I'll go ahead and go first, since
do.
the subject happens to be the report that our office did, if that's all right with you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Sullivan, Ms. Robertson, we appreciate the opportunity to participate in this hearing. We believe it's very important for all of us to remain focused on the culture of all organizations. The Office of Enterprise Assessments and our predecessor organizations have had a very long history of interest in safety protection at the Hanford Reservation and throughout the construction of the waste treatment plant. Over the past decade, our safety experts have conducted numerous safety engineering, safety analysis, construction, quality, and safety culture at WTP. Further, our enforcement office has investigated and taken necessary enforcement actions to address a range of violations of the Department's safety regulations. In fact, a comprehensive consent order was reached with Bechtel National in June of this year, which brought 4 separate pending and ongoing enforcement cases into the WTP closure. The consent order provided an unprecedented level of financial accountability for the cited violations and established legally enforceable corrective action and milestones to resolve long-standing nuclear safety and quality assurance weaknesses that will promote enhanced safety improvements for the substantial remaining work to design, construct, and operate WTP. We mentioned this long history of engagement here to emphasize the point that EA has for many years been concerned about appropriate safety protection at WTP, and while we recently seen signs of positive progress in aspects of their safety culture, there remains a tremendous lot to be done. Last year, Secretary Moniz directed EA to perform our 3rd comprehensive review of the state of safety culture at WTP, which we have done and have recently briefed the Secretary on the results. As we reported to the Secretary, we see positive progress being made for the first time. Both the Office of River Protection and BNI have developed and started to implement strategies and practices that, if pursued conscientiously over the next several years, offer the promise of a healthy safety culture. However, as indicated in our written report, these improvements are in their early stages, and progress could stall if attention lapses, resources are diverted, or management priorities shift. Each assessment used the same methodology in the order to determine change over time. 5 methods, including functional analysis, interviews and focus groups, observations of work activities and meetings, behavior-anchored rating scales, and a survey were utilized to collect information on the organizational behaviors associated with safety culture traits. The information collected across the methods was evaluated for themes and trends within the safety culture traits. Unlike the results of 2014 that indicated that culture was essentially unchanged, the data for this year's assessment showed some positive movement. Today, our organization has substantially built up competencies in safety culture and related assessment methods, and we have added behavioral science expertise to our staff. With our increased capabilities, we were able to independently manage this most recent assessment, with the exception of the very specialized skills needed to administer and analyze the results of the electronic survey. Our increased capabilities also allowed us to more completely analyze the various data sources and provide additional insights into areas for improvement and areas needing additional attention. We want to emphasize again that while we see signs of progress, there's still a lot of work to be done to sustain the momentum and bring about improvements. Both ORP and BNI must instill in all their managers an awareness that developing and sustaining a positive organizational culture is a central tenet of management responsibility and accountability. As we state in our report, safety and quality are outcomes of culture. We know from experience that success or failure is determined by a leader's ability to understand, influence, and manage culture. We are hopeful that under the leadership of the new Assistant Secretary for Environmental Management, Monica Reglabuto, we will see a strong, sustained, and active commitment to the development of a healthy organizational culture, not only at WTP, but throughout the EM program. She believes passionately in getting the job done safely and securely. In addition, during his tenure, Secretary Moniz has been a consistent champion which employees may feel free to raise safety concerns. And we believe this will have a positive impact on WTP and elsewhere throughout the DOE complex. Thank you. That was 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Banowski. Very well done. Mr. Whitney.
Yes, thank you and good evening. Mr. Sullivan and Ms. Roberson, I appreciate the opportunity to discuss the current status of the Department of Energy efforts to improve safety culture, not only at the waste treatment and immobilization plant, but also within the Office of Environmental Management. DOE has completed a number of actions identified in our implementation plan to address the Defense Nuclear Facility Safety Board Recommendation 2011-1. DOE's Office of Enterprise Assessments, as you just heard, most recent independent oversight assessment of the safety culture at WTP concluded that ORP and BNI have made improvements and that both organizations have developed and started to implement strategies and the practices that, if pursued conscientiously over the next several years, offer the promise of a safety culture commensurate with nuclear expectations and the unique charter of WTP. You will hear more of that, I'm sure, from Mr. Podolsky tonight. The safety of our employees, the public, and the environment is the Office of Environmental Management's overriding priority. Establishing and maintaining a positive safety culture and safety-conscious work environment is a key aspect, of course, of mission accomplishment. This includes the need to continuously improve and build upon the progress that we've already made. The Department's implementation plan for Recommendation 2011-1 discusses a range of short-term and longer-term corrective actions to guide us in the right direction. Over the last few years, the Department, the Office of Environmental Management, and our contractors have initiated significant, broadly focused improvement actions in the areas of organizational culture, and a safety-conscious work environment. Consistent with the board recommendations, the Secretary of Energy has championed these cultural improvement efforts. A few of the high-level actions initiated by the Department are the issuance by the Secretary and the former Deputy Secretary of a memorandum in September 2013 entitled Personal Commitment to Health and Safety Through Leadership, Employee Engagement, and Organizational Learning. The Secretary, the Deputy Secretary, and departmental leaders, including myself, have continued to emphasize the importance of fostering a positive safety culture, a robust safety-conscious work environment, and an open, collaborative work environment in policy statements and other departmental communications. Revisions in the Integrated Safety Management Guide, and those were issued in September 2011, identifying the safety culture focus areas of leadership, organizational learning, and employee engagement in the context of the Department's Integrated Safety Management System and focusing on continued improvement and long-term performance. Independent safety culture assessments conducted in 2012 and 2013 by the Office of Enterprise Assessments of Defense Nuclear Facilities and Projects, and in parallel the completion of safety-conscious work environment self-assessments throughout the DOE complex for federal and contractor organizations. Training on safety-conscious work environment, which began in 2012 and continues to today, emphasizing the importance of and methods for establishing and maintaining an open and collaborative work environment within the department, and providing knowledge to assist senior leaders in creating an environment where employees feel free to raise concerns without the fear of retaliation. An additional course, the Safety Conscious Work Environment for Frontline Leaders, has been developed and was piloted in November of this past year. It's under final revision right now, and the course is targeted at over 10,000 federal and contractor first-line managers and supervisors, and will further enhance consistency in the department's safety culture. Also, the issuance in May 2014 of a consolidated report on the Safety Conscious Work Environment extent of condition, which reviewed assessment results from both the independent safety culture assessments as well as the Safety Conscious Work Environment self-assessments. Continuing EM active oversight of and engagement on the ORP and BNI WTP culture improvement efforts. Both ORP and BNI WTP have taken action to improve safety culture and safety conscious work environments. In addition to oversight, EM headquarters has provided safety culture subject matter experts to provide tools and resources to assist in the safety culture journey. We're also implementing activities to sustain long-term implementation of safety culture improvements, such as safety culture assist visit at the waste isolation pilot plant in January of 2015, the development of site-specific safety culture sustainment plans across the DOE complex, the issuance of, by EM, of a safety culture sustainment plan review report, the establishment by the Department of a safety culture improvement panel just in May of this year, and additionally, consistent with the 2011-1 implementation plan, we're evaluating contractual language to establish clear expectations for maintaining a positive safety culture and safety conscious work environment. In conclusion, the Department and EM have responded to the DNFSB 2011-1 recommendation to address the identified underlying safety culture and safety conscious work environment conditions, and have taken broad actions to improve the organizational culture within the department, within EM, ORP, WTP, and other federal and contractor organizations. And we are institutionalizing improvements and remain committed to continuously improving at all levels within the federal organizations, the EM site organizations, and our contractor organizations. Thank you again for the opportunity to discuss the department's safety culture improvement efforts, and I believe we'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have at this point, unless Kevin or Bill would like to make any comments, although we probably used our 10 minutes.
I used exactly 10, so maybe a few seconds. Mr. Smith?
Good afternoon, Mr. Sullivan, Ms. Robertson. I appreciate the opportunity to be here as well to share with you our commitment on for a strong safety culture for the Office for Protection and the Waste Treatment Plant. For the sake of time, I'll defer and submit my comments for the record.
Thank you. Mr. Hamill, did you have anything you wanted to say at the outset?
Good afternoon, and thank you, Ms. Robertson and Mr. Sullivan of the Defense Nuclear Safety Board. I welcome the opportunity to address you and all of the participants at this public hearing, and to provide my perspective on the importance of building and maintaining a robust safety culture at the waste treatment and immobilization plant. And for the interest of time, I also will be submitting my comments for the record, my opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Hamill, and thank you to all of you gentlemen for your opening remarks. And so we'll now turn to board member questions, and I will start. And I'm going to start, Mr. Whitney, with you. The board made this recommendation in 2011, and as the board's practice, it had specific things that was recommended to the secretary. And while much safety culture discussion since then centers on assessments or safety conscious work environment training, the first recommendation the board made back then was to the secretary to assert federal control here of this project. The clear implication in the board's recommendation was that at the time, the federal government did not appear to be in control of setting the right culture here in Hanford. Can you address what's happened since, and do you now think you have federal control over the culture here at Hanford?
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Yes, a lot of, you've heard many of the kind of complex-wide, EM complex-wide activities that have been undertaken, and you will hear more from Kevin and Bill about the details of the actions that have been taken here. But yes, the team here, as well as our EM headquarters staff, has worked very closely together on this, also working with BNI Federal oversight has definitely been established, reinvigorated in this area. In addition to the work of the Office of River Protection, working with BNI as they implement their safety culture improvement plan or management improvement plan, and the Office of River Protection Safety Culture Improvement Plan. We provide, I would say, continuous federal oversight. We have frequent updates with ORP, with Kevin Smith and his staff, and they work very closely, of course, in monitoring the contractor and ensuring that not only that they are putting in place improvement efforts that they've outlined in their work that needs to be done in their reviews, but also that they're effective and that they're following through on them. ORP as well, if you're talking about headquarters oversight of our sites, has also implemented a tremendous number of actions. Now, the quantity of actions does not necessarily mean the quality, and that there is going to be improvement, but I think what you've heard from Mr. Podolsky, what I've seen, that there has been improvement. There is still work to be done, that's for sure, and that's across the complex, but there has been a lot of improvement and the sustained commitment to that improvement, including in the area of federal oversight.
Okay, well, thank you. So I'd like to hear some more about exactly how federal control has been asserted, and maybe Mr. Smith, if you want to take that. But I mean, clearly we don't gain federal control by holding classroom training on safety culture. So and I hear you say that yes, we've got it. So I'd like to hear how we got it. What's different today than say 4 years ago?
Thank you. Probably across the board, there has been efforts and actions taken to insert safety culture right down through performance plans that flow all the way down to individuals. I am directly accountable to Mr. Whitney on the improvement and the actions taken here, and that's part of my performance plan. It is a mandatory performance element. We have cascaded that through the organization. We have established those standards. We've done training. We have do work sessions. We have developed our processes. We also hold our contractors accountable in their performance evaluation plans and their fees. And their fee determining is part of the fee determining process and considerations. I would say that we have had to have our safety culture improvement plans approved by headquarters, by an independent group outside of the line management, and then recommended to Mark Whitney for his approval and concurrence. I think across the board that we have put in the formal mechanisms to do that. There's a bunch of additional physical features, whether they be contract actions I can go into if you like, or contract inserts or items that we have done to be able to ensure the contractors are also following these processes and have a strong safety culture. Those are also working. We do periodic reviews. We have federal personnel from my office inserted into the reviews and activities. We review the metrics and the processes with that. So to answer your question, I think that it is high visibility. I think it is closely monitored. We've all undergone formal training in our office for safety culture, and we're held accountable for the results.
And so for the sake of the public, you weren't here in 2011, correct?
That is correct. I arrived in 2013.
Okay, thank you. So Mr. Hamill, you're directly in charge of the WTP project. So I'm basically going to ask you the same question. How long have you been here? What's your history? And then how do you see the federal control over the project today in terms of do you have the tools you need, et cetera? Please, go ahead.
Yes, I arrived at the waste treatment plant in January of 2013. How I see the oversight is I see that through a series of actions. The first one being the traditional oversight, which is the surveillance of the contractor, watching what they're doing with respect to the implementation plan, how they're implementing it, is it effective, is it yielding results, are those results visible to us, not only in what they provide us in terms of paper, but more importantly in the behaviors that the contractor exhibits. Does it look like it's taking? In addition to those oversights, we have regular interface meetings with BNI where we discuss the health of their organization, and we talk about a number of topics, including safety-conscious work environment. We talk about quality assurance. We talk about safety in the field, all of those key aspects. We look at those discussions and we basically take those and we evaluate those against what's been written over to us in corrective actions and in addition to what we're seeing in the field. So it would be a three-point validation, if you will. Based on that, we provide feedback to the contractor on how they're doing, and we monitor, what they take and how they react to that.
Okay, well, so no world is perfect. I imagine yours isn't either. What's your biggest challenge then in trying to maintain control? And we're talking about control and asserting federal control, I'm talking about over the culture here, about the way, and specifically the culture with respect to the ability of people to bring forward safety issues if they find them.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges for the culture is maintaining it. It's a journey. It's not a destination. It's something you always have to be doing. You have to be leading by example. You have to make sure that the culture is fostered, and that is a challenge. It's a very dynamic project, and you've got to make sure that people don't become caught up in the day-to-day grind without losing focus. Again, very, very important that we keep it visible and forefront, and that is a challenge.
Mr. Smith, you look like you're ready to jump in.
I'd like to add something. I think the biggest challenge is to maintain the trust of the employees. Trust, when it's lost, is very hard to regain. It takes a long time to restore. And the trust had, in a degree, had degraded, and we are in the process of restoring it. And so individuals that struggled before with the inability to get their issues out through normal systems, it just takes time for them to trust. And so I think Bill hit it on the head. Good leadership, good management, consistency, and unrelenting focus on getting the technical issues identified and allowing everybody's voice to be heard. And so the biggest issue is person by person by person. You have to win over that we are in a different place with a different culture, and we're going to sustain it.
I did want to ask you specifically, one of the findings in the assessment done earlier this year on safety culture by Mr. Podonsky and his organization had to do with roles and responsibilities within your office. There still seems to be some lack of clarity, if you will, on roles and responsibilities. What are you doing to address that finding?
Roles and responsibilities are, first of all, it stems partly from not having enough staff to do the job. We have been granted an increase in our substantial increase in the staff that now we have enough people to do all their jobs. And we are in the process of reestablishing the roles and responsibilities. We have an ongoing activity to clearly define that through we have an assistant manager that is working that activity. But the clarity that employees just want to know what's expected of them and where is the organization going. And part of it had to do with, there was just with technical issues and with working through that. Some of the employees didn't have a clear vision of where the Office for Protection is going and the projects were going and how we're going to get there. And creating a very strong vision and a very clean roadmap allows us then for each employee to feel to now better understand where they fit in. We're now in the process of refining that and inculcating it correctly so that everybody will have a view of how they fit in and what their job is and what their roles and responsibilities are.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Roberson?
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. So it's my understanding that various reviews and assessments have identified similar safety cultural problems, and Mr. Podonsky cited some in the enforcement area. And some of those are notable as well. For instance, concerns were identified by the Office of Enforcement, September 15, 2008. Price Anderson Enforcement Office took action against BNI for retaliating against a whistleblower in relationship to nuclear safety requirements. More recently, on June 1, 2015, Price Anderson Enforcement Office issued a consent order in other areas related to safety culture and the failure to resolve identified technical issues in a timely manner. So I want to ask you, Mr. Whitney, I mean, we talk about safety culture as this all-encompassing thing, but what specifically do you have you concluded contribute to these recurring problems?
Thank you, Ms. Roberson. Yeah, and this is, I mentioned in my initial response that, this is something that we're going to continue to have to work on. That, this is not an excuse, but it is a very challenging, hazardous work environment in which we work, a very challenging, complex projects, and not without risk, and so we need to take the opportunity while we're improving, implementing these actions, many of which I outlined, that we're taking the opportunity to learn from each of these, not just for what it means to that specific site, to that specific contractor, or that specific project, so it doesn't happen again there, but to spread those lessons across the EM complex. So we have instituted a process among our senior leadership team where we devote essentially a large portion of our time at our senior leadership meetings, where we bring in the field managers as well as our senior leadership team from headquarters to look at these types of things precisely: safety culture, oversight. At our last senior leadership meeting, we devoted essentially the entire day to the WIP AIB report and got a briefing from the author, the lead, the chair of that board, and then talked about lessons learned, how we can apply that across the complex. And we will have follow-up workshop on safety culture in general and how we're doing it across the complex, as well as federal oversight. This is an example. This is a continuing process. We've had discussions about this, and I agree completely with you. We can't, we have to learn from these things, apply them across the complex, and we're focused on that, and we are committed to doing that. As Kevin mentioned, changing the culture takes time, and I'm not going to sit here today and tell you we have everything solved, that we fixed everything, and actually I hope I never get into that position. We should always be working and improving, and that's what we're going to do, and that's part of it, is sharing those lessons learned across the complex and making sure that we understand that, as well as best practices, industry cross-complex, as well as industry best practices, and the safety culture sustainment plans, the review that was conducted, that was part of that process, to look at the safety culture sustainment plans developed by the sites, first to work with them as they were developed, and then when we conducted our review, not just to look at them and either approve them or conditionally approve them, but also to identify those best practices. We identified over 50 best practices across the complex, feed that back to our sites, our site managers, with a direction to share that with their leadership team and their employees, as well as the contractors. So those are some of the examples of what we're trying to do to make sure those lessons that are not positive lessons when things happen, negative things happen, but that we're actually trying to take those and try to ensure that they don't happen again somewhere else, not just at that particular site.
So, and you correct me if I'm wrong, I think what I just heard you say, I mean, there's lots of activity, there's no doubt about a lot of things, but the things you tended to focus on were federal engagement and improving oversight. Did I read that wrong? Those seem to be the two areas you gravitated to.
Yeah, I would say federal oversight, and in that particular area where I was talking safety culture and safety conscious work environment. But as far as operational upsets, things that Price Anderson Act, where that comes into play, we really try to focus on one, taking advantage of that opportunity that we have with our colleagues in EA. And I mentioned before how we really look forward to not just their support in that area, but also in their assessments, because it's an opportunity for us to learn, and we do look at that as a positive opportunity. But using our contracts to make sure as we move forward in the area of quality, the area of safety culture, as well as Bill mentioned, that we are holding our contractors accountable, and not only to make improvements, but to sustain them moving forward.
Ms. Roberson, may I
I'm
add?
coming to you.
Well,
You have an
may I-
interesting view.
May
Yes.
I add to that?
Yes.
first? Okay. For the edification of the board and for the public, the Office of Enforcement actively follows any whistleblower cases. We're working very closely with the Department of Labor, as well as our hearings and appeals. Right now, this week, we actually have an enforcement team on site looking at another part of the reservation where there is some concern about whistleblower activity, and make sure that they're protected.
Thank you. And I was actually going to ask you the same thing, because I didn't mean to focus on just the enforcement action, but the combination of indicators. So I'd ask you, Mr. Podolsky, if I asked you what were the top two things that, based on all the information your organization has gathered, what do you see as the primary underlying causes?
Well, culture cannot be regulated. It's got to be about leadership. And we've gone through quite a few leaders in Washington, as well as in the field. And what my observation is, for just a short 32 years in the department, is that we're not consistent. There was one secretary that came out to the Hanford Reservation many, many years ago and promised there would be no tolerance for whistleblower retaliation. There wasn't anything done after that. So, in my opinion, through all the assessments that we've done, where people are put in harm's way, we make a lot of assertions and promises, and we don't always follow through for any number of reasons. I think the intentions are well intended, but the follow through is what has to happen. And that's why I said in my opening statement, the positive things that we've seen here on this survey are encouraging, but they're fleeting if my colleagues to the left don't maintain the attention, the sincerity, and the trust that they're building up with the people and the contractor as well.
I see Mr. Smith itching there. Did you want to add something?
Yes, I am itching, thank you.
Yeah.
I think it'd be beneficial to know that we attack the root causes. You don't want we see the results, but you need to fix the root causes. And the root causes were not that people didn't see things wrong, they just didn't see the fixes occurring at the rate that they wanted them to occur. Things weren't getting aligned right, the PDSA was misaligned. So we attacked the root causes. First of all, we changed the performance evaluation plan. We gave 50% of the fee to the contractor for changing the way they did business to self-discovery and self-reporting, to change the paradigm and reward that as a metric and as a process where you harness the entire workforce to find things and be rewarded for finding them. And the second thing we did is to change the professional relationship. We stopped with no surprises and no bashing each other unprofessionally or blaming the others. We also wouldn't let anybody talk amorphously like BNI or Bechtel or DOE or ORP. They had to be specific of where the issue was, and that forced people to work together. We restored communication, collaboration, common focus, early understanding, and we maintained that for several performance periods. And that we essentially created a different relationship with a focus on identifying problems and rewarding problems. Then we had to find a way to get the creativity out. The people had good ideas. We created a grand challenge process, a workshop, where we brought in national lab directors to help us support that and allow people to give their great ideas of how to improve things. Then we found a way that we wanted to have a zero-tolerance issues management system where anybody could put something into the issues management system and have it dispositioned. And then I can talk a number of other things, but I'll stop with a full, unfettered, open-door policy and an email from me to every person that works in ORP, contractor and federal, that no matter what the issue is, if they can't get it solved any other way, they can come to me anonymously or in person, and I will help them, so that we have a full capture of it, so that all issues are rewarded. Nobody shoots the messenger. We want to know all of the issues out. We want to get them on the table and fundamentally change and harness the entire workforce to get WTP done and operational.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Just one last question on this topic for you, Mr. Podolsky. In the most recent assessment, there were a couple of new terms, and it's not the term, what I'd like for you to do is just explain what they were, and they were notable in that they represented some of the weakest results, as I recall from the assessment. Avoidance behavior and affiliative behavior. Can you just tell us, were those new behaviors that were seen, or is just new, we're calling them something different?
Would you repeat that? I didn't hear what you said.
Avoidance behavior and affiliative behavior.
I can't tell you the answer to that.
Okay, no.
But what I will give you information on is that, as I said in my opening statement, we use the same methodologies and the data that we came up with in this report, we feel is very valid. However, there are some nuances that I want to expand upon. For example, the crafts at the site were not as positive as some of the other groups were. But yet the same group, the crafts, said that WTP was the safest place that they've ever worked. So there's qualified data that's not always quantifiable, and through the interviews, not just the surveys, but through the interviews, the observation of work, we got a lot of information. That's why I said it goes beyond just surveys or regulations. It's all about the leadership. And what we found in the overall analysis, as I said, I'm reiterating the point. There's a lot of arrows pointing up, but in order to sustain those, regardless of what the terminology was used, it has to come down to the leadership commitment.
And I agree, but let me just tell you what I got out of the assessment. You tell me if I read it wrong. And it's particularly concerning. The reason I'm raising this is because they were two of the weakest areas. Regardless to what label you put on it, was a concern about, this is, as it specifically relates to the federal staff and the assessment of the federal staff, that they felt threatened and vulnerable, and so they weren't quite there. This was a weak area. And then another weak area was in open communication and cooperation. Those seem to come out very poorly.
Okay.
I just want to make sure we're talking to each other.
We're talking the same. On the federal staff, there's also, I think we also use the term about risk adverse. And what we saw is that if there was an emergency, an immediate safety event, there's no question that both federal staff and contractor would deal with it right away. During the interviews and the meetings, some of the federal staff expressed a risk aversion, our terms, for long-term items down the road. The only interpretation that I would have for that, I haven't talked to the team about that, would be whether or not they have a comfort that they can bring those things forward to their management and that the management would listen. Not a fear of a reprisal. We've never seen that wholesale. The fear is is a perceived fear, not necessarily a real one, but a perceived fear of whether their management would listen to them. And that was a few of the employees.
Okay.
So my next question, I think I'd like to go and either, well, any of the gentlemen who are directly for line responsibility for this project, but so just today, there was a press report, several major newspapers reporting about a draft report that was leaked. So my Google alert comes up because the press reports even note that probably no coincidence we're having this hearing tonight. But the press reports paint the picture of sort of the sky is once again falling at this troubled project. Nevertheless, I hear from you gentlemen a lot of things that I would characterize as confidence. So anybody want to address that report? What's inaccurate or what was left unstated in those press reports? How do you square your confidence as you sit here with what came out in the press today? Mr. Smith, you want to talk?
Well, let me start, and then I'll pass to Mr. Hamill, who's the owner of that report. It was a draft report that we commissioned ourselves, and that it was a preliminary version, and that the activities in that are still in work, and that we haven't issued the final report in that effect. There are very, very few things that are new. 100% of those issues have been captured in our issues management system, are being worked. And that Bill Mr. Hamill is working on a process by which the report will be completed, because these issues are very complex. And I'll pass the mic to Mr. Hamill, if that's right.
Certainly.
Yes, excuse me.
Mic off.
To reiterate some of what Kevin said and further elaborate on that, that was a DOE self-initiated report. It is very important to us. The issues that are contained therein fall into a number of categories. Not only have we captured the recommendations and the 500 plus what I would call comments on design, there are a number of programmatic issues that are in there. We have looked at those preliminarily, and those are captured by the BNI, the Bechtel Managed Improvement Plan, and other mechanisms. We do take them very, very seriously, and we are working them off. As Kevin indicated, less than 5% of what is in that report is what we call new material, i.e. those issues are known to both ORP and to Bechtel. We are aggressively working them off, and there are no new major issues contained therein. Yep.
May I finish? Sure. So I think you should take this as this was initiated by Bill when he arrived in trying to drive and identify all of the physical possible issues left to go, and turn up all the rocks and question everything more than once. And so some of these questions just didn't have an answer at the time. But it's very important that this was the initiative by Mr. Hamill to make sure that we could find what are the potential issues that could derail us to getting the law facility up and going. And so that was the intent of the report. It was self-initiated, and we're methodically working through those issues.
Okay, thank you. And what's the timeline for turning this draft report into something that's final?
Go ahead, you've got an answer.
We're hoping to accomplish that within the next 2 months and have that finalized.
Okay, I'll look forward to it. So, Mr. Whitney, I want to go back to you now, and I want to specifically address your confidence. So I want to refer back to a discussion we had at a prior public hearing that we held in Washington, D.C. last October. So at the time, we pointed out about the accidents at the waste isolation pilot plant down in New Mexico, so WIP. You even referred to these before, although you used an acronym which should cost you at least a quarter here for in a public hearing. You referred to the AIB, the Accident Investigation Boards. But in our prior discussion, we discussed the fact that in January of 13, if memory serves me correctly, there were safety culture surveys done at WIP that were an outgrowth of this 2011 recommendation for WTP. So it was the 2011-1 recommendation WTP. The department decided to take the recommendation to assess conditions elsewhere in the complex. Conditions were assessed elsewhere, including at WIP, and that was done in January of 2013. And that assessment said, in a nutshell, things are fine. And then a year later, they have 2 accidents, and accident investigation boards came in, and one of their major findings was that the safety culture at WIP was not fine. In fact, it was not good at all. So it immediately raised the question of, well, so how valid was that 2013 assessment at WIP? So with all that as background, I want to fast forward to where we are today, the assessments we're getting today. How do we, what makes you confident that we're now getting there? And I say we, I mean the United States government. We're getting there. We now kind of have, do we have assessments that you feel confident are really showing us where we are?
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Well, and first, the self-assessments, the safety culture self-assessments are, of course, one tool. And I personally believe the process of going through the self-assessment has tremendous benefit. and from a learning organization standpoint, to talk in the same language, for the site learning that this is important, not only to their management in the field, but also at headquarters. But it is one tool of many. We discussed last time, and I accepted, and we actually pointed out in our extended condition review report on the self-assessments that the guidance needed more rigor as far as how to conduct the self-assessments. Needed more rigor, needed to be better, essentially. And so we've started a process of working towards that, starting last year, actually, after our hearing. I told you we were going to start looking at that. We have one thing that we did as well shortly after the hearing that is related, and we were able to use the initial part of that process to improve guidance was on the assist visit that occurred earlier this year at WIP, at the Waste Isolation Pilot Plant, which brought in IMPO, brought in other commercial nuclear experience and some other federal agencies. And now I mentioned the stand-up of the Safety Culture Improvement Panel by the Department of Energy, and in just May of this year it was stood up and chartered by the Deputy Secretary. One of the things that they're looking at right now is to kind of continue that process, working with the energy facility contractors group to look at developing a guide that has more rigor, that has better guidance on how to conduct self-assessments. But I still believe that the self-assessments, to some degree, just human nature, they're going to be imperfect. I also believe, but I think they also add tremendous value in helping an organization understand where they are, but also in going through the process and using that with other tools that we have that we had mentioned. I think is a very positive thing, and it'll help us moving forward. Now, since I believe all the self-assessments were completed, the first round prior to our hearing in October of last year. Since then, we have completed a review of the safety culture sustainment plans, which was also a process that incorporated what was learned in the self-assessments. And so we have not yet conducted the next round of the self-assessments.
Okay, so I'll turn to you, Mr. Podolsky. So you work in an office in Washington, D.C. Your job is to run up and tell the secretary, based on whatever you're doing, about where there's problems, not only here, but anywhere in the complex, about not only safety culture, about a myriad of other issues. So how do you really know? I mean, how do you really know how the conditions are here out in Hanford?
Well, a good example, Mr. Sullivan, was our safety culture review in 2010. We did it with our nuclear engineers. We did it with our protocols that we normally use. And the results were not as reliable as we feel they are today, because what did we do different? We got a hold of behavioral scientists that actually were experts in the field. We used validated methodology that the NRC uses, that are standard approaches. We used large sampling size. For example, this time we had over 1,000 people, individuals, participate in the survey. We had over 400 people in the group, so that the sample size was rather rigorous. But as Mr. Whitney says, anything that is involving human are going to be imperfect. So we're very cautious when we go forward on any of these to make sure that we know exactly what is happening through our interviews, and we have a degree of assurance to go to a cabinet official to tell that cabinet official how things are going or not going well. So the discipline that we use, the expertise that we use, give us a comfort that we have an understanding. So let's go back to the report that is the subject of this public meeting. Some people think that it is sugar-coated with the results. But if you read it, it's not being sugar-coated. We're simply saying, in this case, Mr. Secretary, Mr. Assistant Secretary, we see the arrow in the right direction. When Secretary Moniz directed us to go do this, he said, I want to know if there's improvement. He wasn't looking to see if things were solved. And we didn't say things are solved in our report. We say there's a lot more work to be done, and I think we've heard the line say that as well. So to your question directly, we never know 100%, but we're pretty confident in the methodologies we've used here for the two of the last three, as well as the 9 others that we did around the complex. And we've been consistent with the expertise that we've been using and the understanding. Now, you didn't ask, but I will answer this. The expertise that we used, we consistently use the same contractor organization for conducting the survey. This time, we had enough experience on our own, and the contractor's schedule was not necessarily going to match ours. We weren't going to gamble. The secretary wanted this done, so we made sure that we went to this particular contractor expertise. We went to her partner, and she recommended to us somebody independent from NIOSH. So we had the independence, we had the efficacy of the process, so we had as much assurance that we could go forward that I felt comfortable going forward to Secretary Moniz to say, this is the results of this assessment.
Okay, so having said all that, you said earlier that this was mostly about leadership, which I imagine then is a positive reflection on the 3 gentlemen sitting to your left. But going forward, how do we make sure that there's good leadership? What are you recommending the secretary? The secretary himself is only there as long, perhaps, as the current administration, which means there'll be new secretary, perhaps in not too long in the future. How do you what gets put in place to make sure that good leadership or well-performing leadership can carry forward?
Well, you're asking my opinion on something that's really something that's an institutional challenge, especially in an organization like DOE and any other executive branch where you have a changeover in the political team. So you have a constant change. So the consistency of leadership, be it at ORP at the federal level, be it at EM at the deputy assistant secretary level, if those are career, then you have sustainability. And so the secret, in my opinion, that's what you're asking for, is the sustainability of good leadership is going to rest with consistency and sustainability. And unfortunately, you don't always get that with the political turnover that you have in most of the agencies, including Department of Energy. Because Secretary Moniz, I believe, as Assistant Secretary Reglabuto, are sincere and committed to the worker health and safety of this department. But how long do they have to actually implement that? So the sustainability of the career people is what's going to have to be in place. How do you measure that? You measure that by coming back, by having public hearings like this, by having oversight like we do, to see how it's going, and talking to the people. And finding out what's really happening. That's the only value I put into these surveys and to the work group sessions that we held with our experts, is that listen to the people. Because the people, if they have a sense that you're there to really hear what they have to say, they'll open up and they'll tell you. Now, we had one deputy secretary, this is not part of your question, but it's part of what I want to give to you, if you don't mind, is that we had one deputy secretary came out here and addressed 4,000 people. And that individual, that deputy secretary came back to me and said, Podonsky, not one person raised a question to me. And I said, Mr. Deputy Secretary, the venue that you were in was not conducive to anybody raising their hand. So my point on that is the consistency and sustainability of the leadership to carry forward and prove to the people that they are trusted, and so that the responsibilities are carried out by the site, by the workers, and sustained by the leadership.
Okay, so just a comment, but not a question. Perhaps given the fact that we all know that leadership will turn over because of the nature of our nation's system, maybe some of these folks, behavioral scientists, can help you find a few traits to look for right after a change in leadership that might give you an indication of whether or not there's a change, and if so, which direction. Did you want to add something, Mr. Whitney?
Yes, Mr. Sullivan, I just wanted to add that this is precisely the reason that the Secretary and Deputy Secretary, one of the reasons, established the Safety Culture Improvement Panel that is led by senior leaders, career leaders in the department, co-chaired by the Associate Undersecretary for Safety and Security in DOE. and as also has representation, senior representation from all the program secretarial offices, as well as field representation. In fact, the co-chair of the group is Kevin Smith's deputy, J.D. Dow, to look at ensuring that, one, we have these issues that we need to look at that we know, some of the things that came out of the DNFSB recommendation that we're working on now. There are other things that we've discovered through our self-assessments and review processes that we're looking at. But more than anything, to institutionalize this as a priority for the department at a very senior levels moving forward. And I think that, along with the safety culture, the things that we've talked about, the safety culture sustainment plans, which really do look at the institutionalization of those things that are working that we put in place over the last few years, as well as trying to identify things that could help as well in addition to those. So those are the types of things that we're doing, and I think the Secretary and Deputy are focused on that. That is something before this administration is over, they want to see, make sure we have that institutionalized, and that's one of the reasons for it.
All right, Ms. Robertson?
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. So, since we have the executive career service here, one of the, and my first question is to you, Mr. Podolsky, and you'll tell me if I'm reading this wrong. I kind of read this most recent assessment. One, the team was looking at trends, but things that were significant up or questionably down. So one of the things that we noticed in the assessment was the emphasis on the conflict between headquarters, the program, and the field office. And I just want to get you to elaborate, if you'd like to, before I ask those gentlemen how they fix it, how they're fixing it.
And if I say I don't want to?
Listen.
No, the interviews and the discussions that the assessment folks got was that there was not a lot of encouraging words about guidance from headquarters. In a discussion with Mr. Whitney not too long ago, we talked about that because you can be at a site working very hard, and you can have all the perceptions you want, but if the people in place, be they executive service members or not, don't feel that they're getting complete support and guidance out of headquarters, that's their reality. And having been in headquarters, somebody once asked me the question, what's my biggest problem doing my oversight? And I said, being in headquarters. And the reason for that is because people in headquarters don't always have the sense of what it's like to be on the front line doing the work out in the field. The people, once upon a time when I was chief of HSS, not too very long ago, our policy promulgators were generating policy that didn't make a lot of sense for the implementers that had to live with it. So the same thing is true, and in our report that you make reference to, there was conflict expressed, not always getting consistency or the type of support that perhaps the folks in the line wanted to have from the headquarters.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Podolsky. So, Mr. Whitney, can you see that issue, or you think that's a false perception?
No, I think that, well, first of all, I did talk to Mr. Podolsky about this first when we were briefed on the results of the report and talked to the chair of the report. Understand that some of those comments came from interviews, not surveys, and so that's an important, very important fact that I wanted to really understand what they meant, because my understanding was that they weren't necessarily specific to safety culture, but they were general statements. Either one is concerning, but the general statements, I wanted to understand kind of what that might mean. And so Kevin and I and the other folks at the staff talked about that. There is, and continue to talk about that, there is a dynamic, as you know, between headquarters and field that has existed for many, many years and will probably always exist. And it's something that in the past year we've really tried to focus on. We have, we actually dedicated a large portion of last summer and fall to the headquarter field alignment issue. And I think a lot of this has to do with that headquarter field alignment issue. I think it's not unnatural, doesn't mean it's right, it's not unnatural when you have geographic distance between organizations and one is a headquarter and you have a lot of field sites, that you're going to have some of these issues. And so we wanted to drill down into what those issues were, and so we spent time on that. We developed protocols to try to advance things on roles and responsibilities, who does what, when, how, and the correct way to communicate with folks at different levels. I mean, some very basic stuff that we were having issues with, to be quite frank. Clearly, we need to do more since this assessment happened more recently. It's something that we're going to continue to focus on. I feel very encouraged by the leadership that we have in the field. We have very strong leadership, and my job is to empower them to do their job and to provide oversight and allow enable them to provide oversight of the work that's done here. So it's something we'll continue to focus on. And I don't know if Kevin or Bill have something they want to add to that.
Coming to Mr. Smith next to see how it's working for him.
Thank you, Mr. Robertson. I think will always be a degree of tension between a headquarters and a field. Just if nothing else, the distance is part of that. I think just EM in general, environmental management in general, has very little buffer, if you will, between Congress and the media and others. So it's kind of a tough environment anyway, just in general. But I think the answer is detailed communication and knowledge of the work in the field. Because the better the headquarters point of contact understands the work in the field, the better it can represent and help with the field back and forth. And I think that for us, a little bit of, it's not abnormal for me to be on the phone a dozen or more times a day to some point of contact at headquarters, depending upon what the topic is, or a particular person that represents us at headquarters maybe 6 or 7 times a day. We're working things that are important or working through issues. So I think communication, understanding the mission of the field are the two probably most important to align the field and the headquarters. And I know Mr. Whitney has really made this a priority in the last year, and that the number of field manager meetings with the headquarters staff has dramatically increased to try to forge that alignment and forge that team. I will say that this last year has been difficult because of we are currently in federal court with the state of Washington, and that has caused the communication to slow a little bit. And we also had a notice of intent to sue on the vapors, which has also caused a degree of more careful communications with the legal undertone. Mm-hmm. And so I think that has colored probably the commentary and the rating this last period in that regard.
Okay, I appreciate that, because my sense is, you have other field offices, so kind of the reason we got into this recommendation was there's always some conflict, but you can tell when it's outside the circle. It's not within that normal range, and that was my sense from this review. Okay.
May I add, because
Yes.
Kevin said something I wish I had, and it's a very important point. It has to do with being in another person's shoes, and a lot of it is just being able for folks at headquarters to get out to the field and spend some time in the field, folks in the field to get to headquarters and spend some time at headquarters to really understand what happens, because a lot of times we have folks, it's not a bad thing, it's just, we have a large organization, and we have many folks that have spent their entire career at headquarters, many folks that have spent their entire career field, and they don't really see what the other side does on a daily basis. And so there are a lot of misperceptions that also contribute to this tension. So we've tried to institute at the senior level, at the mid-level and the working level, the career level. It has not been as difficult a task in past to have details, but at the senior level it has not been that common of late. And so we've tried to do more of that over the past year. Of course, that costs money to do details, but we've done a lot, including folks from Kevin's staff, one of his assistant managers, and his chief of staff as well spent time with us, and I think that was beneficial not only for us, to them, but also to the organization as they bring those experiences back, and vice versa as we send senior folks out to the field to do details. It's very important. It's something we want to continue.
Okay.
Ms. Robertson?
Yes, sir.
May I add to this? It's a very interesting line of questioning, because while not directly related to the federal side, But this whole thought process that Mr. Smith and Mr. Whitney are talking about is walking in somebody else's shoes. We also have to apply that to the workers and the people that we are asking to do this difficult task. Because when you also understand not just what headquarters and the field does, but you understand what the workers are doing on a regular basis, then we have a better understanding of some of their challenges and some of the reasons why you're even having this public hearing today. Because I realize that sounds almost Pollyannish, but as the former head of HSS, that was a big part of our job, is to understand the worker health and safety part of the equation. And that's something that the agency known as DOE often strives to achieve, but doesn't always get to that point.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, sir. So Mr. Hamill, I guess my last question on this one is to you. You're in receipt of a lot of views in this area. How's it affecting your ability to really implement oversight of the project operation?
I agree with Kevin and Mark. Distance does make it difficult, but Kevin said something I think that's really, really important. He talked about detailed communication and knowledge. And what I can tell you is that for certain topics, we've actually utilized a tactic or basically a summit where we, on key topics such as contract management, project management, we've actually taken myself and key members of my staff back and met with our headquarters counterparts. That actually has worked very, very well. We did that knowing, that the distance is a problem and these topics would be difficult topics and that there is no substitute for face-to-face communication. I think Mark said that we're working on this and we've placed a lot of emphasis on it this year, and this is one of the ways that we're doing this, knowing that this does help.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you, Mr. Smith, what is it that you see that makes you believe progress is being made in this area? Because we saw this raised in previous reviews as well, too. What is it you see now that makes you say you think things are improving?
Well, things are better than they were when the survey was taken, for sure. And I will tell you that having a good, clean course that the Secretary has laid for us on direct feed law makes all the difference in the world. Because now people have predictability in their lives, they see things more clearly. Both the headquarters and the field can be on the same team with the same focus, and I'll tell you that from our contractors and all of our labor union folks and all of the even subcontractors now know where we're headed, and that makes a tremendous difference. So I think a clear path forward to getting WTP up and running that we have now with the Secretary is very important, and I think that has made all the difference.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Sullivan.
Focus now to Mr. Smith and Mr. Hamill. Again, a few questions, trying to come out of the clouds and down to the worker level in the weeds. And by the way, you said watch the workers. I'll just point out, I know we're talking WTP, but I was here about 2 months ago and I was over in tank farms watching folks on a 90-degree day with full respirator and the anti-contamination clothing, and that looked like that was kind of tough work with nuclear control. So a shout out to them. I know everybody's here is doing hard and tough work. So I want to talk about some of just the specifics that come out of this a recent assessment that might be more germane to them. But some of the folks at WTP, for example, Mr. Hamill, we're talking about a lack of communication going on between WTP and tank farms. So there were specific comments about taking cover over in the tank farms and they didn't know about it, and oh, by the way, they're downwind of the tank farms at WTP, concerns with the vapor smells, if it's over there, what's happening over here. Can you address that, specifically the communications issue and what's happening to make the workers feel better at WTP?
One of the things that we're have implemented is better communication between the tank farms and the WTP through the route of the FAC reps, so that they are aware of what activities are happening over at the tank farms. And the FAC reps, being in the field, communicate that to the site contractor management that helps flow that information around. So that's one of the specific things that we did in response to that.
Okay, Mr. Smith?
We have done a number of things to fundamentally improve communication between the twins. The first and probably the most significant one is we put and rechartered the One System program to a much more comprehensive marrying of two different programs, two different contracts, and providing a governance board at the senior level so that we are now driving to marry the two contracts up to feed it to operate the plant. And so they're working closer together than they ever had been before. So that means all the interface control documents or the standards are being put into place, and with that has come the communication processes to go and communication as well. And particularly on the vapors issue, the tank farm lead, Mr. Dave Olson, has gone a long ways into bringing not only just the waste treatment plant along, but also the rest of the interface contractors to ensure that that communication now extends well beyond the tank farm. It is timely. Those kinds of devices and communications are becoming real-time, wireless and electronic. We're trying to take the step into the tank farm of the future. And that means that all of the communications that go with that. And lastly, I think all of us would like to see, at the end of the day, every worker go home with both their eyes, all their fingers, and all their toes. And that leadership needs to take that responsibility on and ensure that things are done properly and that they have the responsibility for caring and ensuring their employees are safe. And that is being inculcated at multiple levels, and we are in the process of very heavily restoring that responsibility to make sure that it's absolutely clear. And with that, I've had to take and make DOE be the owner of the plant and be responsible for the oversight and not be blending in any aspect, but to stand there, to be the oversight, to be the person that people can approach and be able to raise issues and concerns immediately. So many things have happened to ensure that this is a better place and it functions better and it has the communication needed to keep people safe. It's working better.
Okay, thank you. So I want to ask you now about another specific comment out of that assessment, and it had to do with something that was characterized as a strong avoidance behavioral norm within your organization. And so that was explained as an organization that tended to not reward success, but rather to punish mistakes, and therefore people tried to avoid making decisions or doing other things that would actually bring risk upon themselves. Are you addressing that?
Yes. So first of all, the way that particular bars works is that we had about 12% not take the survey. And the way they interpret that is typically that characteristic means that people are afraid to take the survey. There's also another explanation for it, is that people are tired of surveys. And since we have had multiple surveys in fairly short duration of time, there probably is a degree of fatigue. But we have taken it seriously. And I've made it so that, again, my standards of how to lead an organization is how we're grooming and developing the organization. And I have offered the opportunity for anybody in my organization at any level can challenge a decision anytime, one time for free. And that just opens up the door for that individual to feel confident to come in and say, hey, this wasn't really the right decision because you didn't consider this or this. And it has made it a different place for us to be able to have people come in. As for behavioral norms, we make every effort to reward anybody that brings issues up that are of concern. We've opened multiple avenues for that. We've created new, different professional technical review panels and processes. We've established opportunities for individuals to be able to raise technical issues differently. And I've already mentioned the zero tolerance or the zero threshold level for the issues management system. So I think there's multiple reasons for that. But as we talked about before, every single person has to see one person at a time to trust. Now, one last aspect, decision making. Today's environments with electronics, just about anybody's willing to push a decision to the highest level. If you don't have to make a decision, you can't be wrong. And we don't groom people to make decisions. So we have found a way and continue to try to make and reward people for decisions at their level that's within their scope and responsibility to groom them, as you were talking about, the next generation of managers and leaders. And so when I'm away, I refuse to make decisions. I leave it to the deputy manager. That the deputy manager is running the organization. He knows our culture and where we're headed, and he can make these decisions in my absence. And we try to do that at various levels. If we don't have to make a decision, and it's empowered at that particular manager or employee's level, we let them make that decision. So we're grooming and developing the next generation of leaders. We're grooming people to be able to make decisions. We're grooming people to have the confidence to make decisions and feel that they can make the decisions. It's just all a function of leadership and development.
Okay, thank you. So my last question on this topic, I'm going to jump back to you, Mr. Hamill. Differing professional opinion, employee concerns programs, just with respect to the WTP project, are those programs working, and they're two separate programs, right?
You know, from my perspective, yes. One of the ways I think you can tell is you know, the programs in and of themselves are there to be used kind of as a last resort. So what you'd expect to hear if those programs are working, in my opinion, is that you'd hear open, candid conversation in the staff meetings, on the floor, in discussion, discussion with myself, and discussion between staff. Those are good indications of how the culture is generally going. If people can talk openly about the tough stuff, the tough decisions, the things that they're not comfortable with, the things they don't understand, and ask, well, you know, why is management making this decision? If those discussions can happen in an open and candid conversation, I think you have a culture that basically allows those programs to work quite well. When they're not allowed to happen, I think then, you know, they may act as an outlet, but I don't think they're nearly as effective. So I think that's a lot of that has to do with the culture that you are leading. Sure.
May I add to that? So to Bill's point is that if you really have a good organization, that there are a lot of opportunities that those programs aren't as needed as much, but they're there if people need them, and we emphasize them, and we don't, we encourage them where appropriate. I will tell you that the DPO process, particularly the biweekly meeting we have on technical issues, is a unconstrained environment where we talk and bring technical issues up and bring them out on the table, and we really make every effort to know what our risks are and how we're going forward. So the fundamental culture below that is bringing these issues to us. The DPO process is available. We encourage it, but we want to have managers consider employees' concerns and issues well before it gets to an acute phase that you have to have somebody outside you. So Bill's describing is a process by which he encourages these technical issues to be brought to him, and we will have a team our chief engineer, we will have our senior technical advisor sit down, go through, evaluate, and try to have and bring these issues into fruition and resolve them where everybody is valued in the process. And so Bill, that process is working quite well. We also have it at the ORP level, so we also have a level above Bill where the deputy manager has worked a technical review process where, again, technical issues can be vetted across domains. Then lastly is that we have reinvigorated the fail-safe programs Department of Energy has, the IG, the employee concerns, the equal opportunity. All those programs we make sure are available to all employees, and we advertise that on a regular basis. And I've already mentioned that I'm the fail-safe, that they can always come to me.
Okay, but are these programs being used? And I say that knowing full well that sometimes you put the suggestion box out. You could have a great organization, it's happy land, nobody has any suggestions. You can have a terrible organization where they're so paranoid they think you're videotaping who might be stuffing something in the suggestion box. Either way, the result's the same. There's nothing in the suggestion box. So are we getting much on these programs? And if not, how do we know which of those two we're in?
So the answer on the employee concerns program is periodic. Okay, not very often in the employee concerns piece. It has actually kind of gone for, when I first arrived about 2 years ago, to be quite high in numbers to reasonably low and periodic now. But they're there and available. The differing professional business is thriving. We have all kinds of people bringing up technical issues or different ways to do things or even different ways to build a plant. It is a robust process. There are still issues to work through, and we still have employees that want their idea to be the winner. but it is working.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Robertson?
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. So actually, I'm going to come to you first, Mr. Whitney. I know Mr. Smith will want to add some clarifying feedback. The backlog of unresolved technical issues at the WTP project was a product of questionable management decisions. That was one of the board's conclusions in its recommendation, which was one of the precipitating reasons for the recommendation overall. What have you done to remedy the backlog of unresolved technical issues on the project?
And I will, defer to Kevin on the specifics of this, but I have recently received a briefing on the technical issues and where the team is. I think Kevin and his staff, both ORP and BNI, have done a tremendous amount to reduce the backlog. There are two pieces of this. One, you want to, it could be a good sign that you have a lot of technical issues that had been identified, whether they're by staff, by self-identification or not. But you also want to make sure you have the resources dedicated to then resolving them. And in my briefings and work with Kevin and his team, I'm confident that they're applying the resources to do that. Some of these issues are very difficult and complex and are going to take some time, and they're still working through that. And I'm talking years in time in some cases. And I'll turn to Kevin to provide more details on the specific numbers of how many cases before and where they are now.
Well, there's two parts to your question. Let's talk about the T1 teams, the high-level ones, the 9 areas that really are the more difficult ones that are out there first. Those teams, those particular areas have been projectized. They're tracked meticulously. We have dedicated team leads, and we're trying to drive a conclusion. Knock on wood, we're on track to knock 2 of these out for good. The criticality and HPAV may very well be the first 2 we can get done. So hopefully we can get them off the plate this year where we're working methodically. As for general issues, one of the byproducts of trying to go to a self-discovery, self-reporting where you all of a sudden reward employees for bringing out issues is that you get issues. And now there are those issues that were brought onto the plate plus the backlog issues. Mr. Hamill here has incentivized or proposed and incentivized the team for Bechtel to try to make a fiscal reduction in this fiscal year. He set a goal of trying to reduce it by 50%. I just happened to be in a meeting yesterday with Ms. McCullough, the head of WTP, where she set the team's goal and focus again as eliminating the backlog of these issues because it's the defense to get the project done on time and to make sure that we can resolve them effectively. So they have a very good dedicated goal on. But these are technical issues. Some of them aren't ripe until you reach that point of the design build. So some of them will hold a little bit. Mm-hmm. Internally to the Office of River Protection, we also have issues that have been around for a period of time that we are bringing focus in and trying to bring to resolution as well. So I would say at both levels for both projects, at the WTP level and also for RP, we are focusing on eliminating these issues because that's important to our success, and it's also needed to get the project done.
So are you confident you have a functioning issues management system, because you have emergent issues as well too, right?
It's sometimes a lot. It's significant to address, and the resources to do that are you only have so many great technical experts in certain fields. So the answer is we're working on them, and we've got a ways to go, but it is a focus of ours right at the present time.
Okay. Did you want to comment, Mr. Hamill?
And to further support that, one of the key things that's important on the T1 through T8 issues is the fact that we not only have technical teams that are working them, we've enlisted the aid of the national laboratories, academia, and industry, the best that we can get to support closing those items. So there is a lot of emphasis on there, and we're trying to get the best that we can get to close those technical issues.
Okay. So, Mr. Whitney, simply put, what have you communicated as your expectations, your leadership expectations for oversight of WTP nuclear safety processes?
Well, first of all, you know, the very highest level communication, and it's something I try to reinforce, is what's captured in our integrated safety management system, our order. And that is what safety culture is and what our responsibilities are as leaders. And that's got to be a consistent part of every message that we provide. And then it's being involved. As a leader, being involved. We've talked a lot about what that means. How do you drive safety culture, whether it's in a federal organization or oversight of a contract organization. But it is a lot of the things like being visible, being in the field, both for folks like Kevin and for BNI. You got to get out there and see the people and work with the people that are actually doing the work. So you know, my expectations are, one, in the area of safety culture, the kind of the recommendations and the implementation plan that we have is that we focus on those, that we continue to improve safety culture, but that we also institutionalize that, and that has to be at the core of everything we do. And that goes back to the open statement about what safety culture is to DOE. There are a lot of different definitions for safety culture. I think the one that we have identified in ISM is the right one for DOE, and that kind of sets everything out. And then the ISM attachment 10. That captures our safety culture, the way we approach safety culture, and how we integrate that into our integrated safety management system. And that also is a clear expectation. And I don't think there should be a lot of questions on,
No, I understand what you're saying. I guess, simply put, my question is, one of the concerns the board raised was more than expected tension when it came to integrating engineering and nuclear safety. So how do you determine that there's been improvement in that area?
Well, for me, at headquarters, providing the field oversight, it is working with my site manager, working with Kevin, having confidence in my site management, not just here, everywhere. And here I have tremendous amount of confidence in Kevin and his team. We talk about this on a regular basis, and he tells me what he's doing to ensure that that's being done. So for me, that is my role when I am able to visit here. I get briefings on this. Had a briefing today. Had a briefing the last time I visited on technical issues. But we always have some portion of safety culture and the oversight function that the federal organization is to provide. So for me, that is my role. And ensuring that I have the right leaders in place that have the right training, the right mindset, understand my expectations in this area, and then allow them to do their job and hold them accountable, and reward them when they do a good job and hold them accountable when something else happens.
I just come to you, since you are who gives Mr. Whitney confidence. How do you determine that there's been improvement?
Well, Ms. Robinson, you know that anybody responsible for nuclear operations take it absolutely seriously. And since we also have an active tank farm that's a set of nuclear facilities as well, and you know I've had responsibilities in past assignments also. So I think that, first of all, I keep Mr. Whitney informed on a day-to-day basis of just picking up the phone if anything turbulent or anything unusual happens. I also communicate very clearly the needs, the infrastructure, the requirements, how it's performing, and what we're going. And so we have some pretty clean communication on a day-to-day basis in between the two of us. As for ensuring the question about the turbulence that used to exist in WTP relative to nuclear safety, I think has smoothed out considerably. I think it works a lot more efficiently, and I think that they still have some challenges to bring the safety basis into alignment, but Mr. Hamill here is keeping the fence up, that he is driving the series of decisions necessary, particularly in the high-level waste facility, that it has to have the PDSA combination, maybe DSA, aligned before we're going to give them any authorization to resume full construction. And I'm upholding that fence for him. He has to prove it to me, and I take that obligation and that safety basis delegation authorities seriously. And I don't think anybody will have a doubt of that.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Hamill, Are the subcontractors here from a safety standpoint, safety culture standpoint, are they held to the same standard as the prime BNI?
Yes, what I've seen is I've seen Bechtel hold their subcontractors especially accountable. We see that through field performance. We see that through the general overall safety briefings, which the subcontractors are at. We see that and how Bechtel treats their entire site workers with the same expectation and standard. So I can definitely say yes. The expectations are consistent. They're applied consistently, and they're communicated consistently.
Okay, Mr. Podolsky, this point was raised in your most recent assessment that there was at least a perception that the subcontractors were not held to the same standard as the prime. So I'm going to ask you first if you can address any specifics from that, and second, since you're also responsible for enforcement, can you speak to the enforcement by the department on the subcontractors?
The question is actually a very good question because it actually is pervasive through the department. I've just completed going around and talking to almost all the national laboratory directors and site managers for those labs. And the biggest issue that the lab directors have is having the subcontractors following the same safety standards that their primes do. I can't give you the specific on WTP, but I would say my assumption is that there is difficulty there as expressed by the other parts of the department. Our enforcement folks are starting to look at that across the board because this is one of the issues that came out of 17 labs that I visited, 16 out of the 17. And it's something that has been evasive in the department. And it's something that we're going to start working with the national labor unions, AFL-CIO, metal trades, steel workers, buildings and construction, is because they're following, most of them are following OSHA standards. They're following other EPA, but they're not always following the standards of the DOE. And that's been a difficult challenge, as I said, across the complex. Specifically here, I don't recall how dramatic of a problem that was. But if it's happening at least 16 of the 17 labs, I'd say it's probably the same issue. And so I'm starting an initiative out of VA that we've actually started about 3 weeks ago. Secretary has asked us to look at what are the best practices in the department above and beyond operational experience that is part of the AU organization's responsibilities. And one of the things that we're starting to do, Mary Jo Campanoni, that you may recall, is leading this project, is starting with the labor unions to find out how we can bridge the gap between what we're hearing at some of the sites about the standards that the subs are using versus what the primes are using.
So it's kind of a contract question, so I'm speaking generically, right? If I'm talking about contracts and legal stuff, but can you reach directly to a subcontractor, or do you have to rely on your enforcement upon the contractor, who in turn is supposed to be enforcing upon the sub?
The legislation that the Congress gave to the department on the three areas, just for everybody's edification, is nuclear safety, worker health and safety, 851, and then also control of classified matter. We go to the prime contractors.
Okay, so you go to the prime, and the prime has to keep the subcontractor in line, if you will, if the subcontractor is not meeting the requirements. Is that your statement?
That's our understanding.
Okay, and is that problematic for you? I mean, so anything that can become a daisy chain sometimes loses something in translation.
The whole enforcement activity is a challenge because it's a long process. It is very much a legal process as well as a technical process. We haven't had difficulties with conducting enforcement all the way down, but it's been taking, in some cases, up to 3 years. So reaching the perpetrators of any potential violations has not been a problem for us thus far. With, just for the board's edification, NNSA, we go to the administrator. We do all the all the investigatory work, but ultimately it's the administrator that signs off on the documentation. Only one time did we have one of the previous administrators for NNSA go to a lesser recommendation, but to answer your point directly, we've always been able to reach the intended target.
Okay, thank you. I think we've reached the scheduled time where we were going to end this session. Do you have any more questions you'd like to ask?
I do. I
Okay,
have
go ahead.
at least one more question I'd like to ask. In one of the board's previous public meetings, one of the experts on safety culture discussed concerns that safety-conscious work environment approaches tend to focus more on personal safety rather than organizational culture of safety. The expert noted that this was a concern raised by unions and DOE personnel at a 2014 workshop for DOE facility representatives. In addition, most of the assessments at WTP conclude that people are willing to raise issues but did not believe that management would accept and address their concerns. This suggests a problem with a belief in leadership commitment, visibility, and dependability rather than general workforce fear of retribution. So, Mr. Smith, I'm asking you, because we're talking about WTP, could you tell us why the primary response to the board's recommendation has been a focus on safety-conscious work environment? And are there specific components of safety-conscious work environment that you think have been fruitful in your pursuit to change the culture on the project?
I don't, well, as you well know, Mr. Robertson, I didn't live through the first part of this period of time. So I'm only used to running organizations with these kinds of cultures and sensitivities. And so it's actually a foreign concept to me because it's internal to what I do. I mean, it's just the way a good manager should manage. I do think that the board's focus on safety culture has highlighted a need to remind ourselves both on nuclear culture but also individual culture, and has actually had expanded the discussion into things like infrastructure, aging infrastructure, and do we have the right trained workforce for the future. So I think it has been very helpful in expanding the dialogue into a lot of areas. For me personally, I think it has helped me look for the difference between an M&O contract and an FAR contract, where I have to be much more vigilant, I find, in an FAR contract that I don't have seams or complacency. So to answer your question, I'm not known for giving the board a lot of kudos on public, but I think this one has been well served.
So we end with a kudo to the board. That was wonderful. All right. Well, thank you very much to each of you for your testimony. At this point, we've concluded our questions to you as a panel, and so thank you very much. And if you'd like, you can return to your seats.
Thank you.
So at this time, we will continue with the testimony from the board's senior technical staff. The board recognizes Dr. Daniel Boland, who is the group lead for nuclear programs and analysis for our staff. He's going to briefly discuss our staff's perspective on the status of DOE's execution of the implementation plan for Board Recommendation 2011-1, the corrective actions taken in response to the recommendation at WTP, and the results of the extent of condition reviews conducted by the Department of Energy. Dr. Boland, please proceed.
Good evening, Mr. Sullivan and Ms. Roberson. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Daniel Boland. I'm the group lead for nuclear programs and analysis at the Defense Nuclear Facility Safety Board. My group is responsible for overseeing the Department of Energy's implementation of Board Recommendation 2011-1, Safety Culture at the Waste Treatment and Immobilization Plant. All actions in DOE's implementation plan have essentially been completed except for one. In Action 1.6, DOE committed to reviewing the contract for the WTP project and to, and I quote, implement appropriate mechanisms to achieve balanced priorities, and include safety culture elements, end quote. The completion of Action 1.6 is necessary to ensure that the contract properly awards the safety performance that DOE expects of the contractor. The delay in the completion of Action 1.6 is due to the fact that the baseline for the project is currently being reevaluated, and the contract will not be renegotiated until the new baseline has been determined. There have been areas where implementation of the plan has resulted in improvement within DOE. However, there have been other areas where implementation was less effective due to inadequacies of the plan. DOE's efforts have led to increased awareness and understanding of organizational culture and its impact on the safety of operations at defense nuclear facilities. The concepts of safety culture are being discussed at all levels within DOE and its contractor organizations, and DOE senior leaders have been engaged in establishing their expectations and communicating their support for improving safety culture within the complex. An important outcome of DOE's efforts was the procurement of outside expertise in organizational psychology and the development and application of in-house expertise and tools in the Office of Enterprise Assessment. In early 2012, that capability provided the first full picture of the organizational weaknesses within the WTP project and the cultural dysfunctions that led to those weaknesses. Since that time, the Office of Enterprise Assessment's independent safety culture assessment team has provided valuable insight into the organizational cultures at other major defense nuclear facility construction projects, key DOE federal organizations, and the Pantex plant. However, there were some weaknesses that only became apparent during the plan's implementation. The plan was developed and approved by DOE prior to the completion of the 2012 Independent Safety Culture Assessment at the WTP project. As a result, the plan was based on preliminary analysis and assumptions about the underlying causes of the organizational weaknesses that led to the board's decision to issue the recommendation. DOE did issue an addendum to the implementation plan to clarify their approach to resolving the findings of the independent assessment at WTP. However, the implementation plan was not modified to ensure that these findings and their underlying causes were incorporated in its actions at other defense nuclear facilities. The board issued the recommendation because it was concerned that, and I quote, both DOE and contractor project management behaviors reinforce a subculture at WTP that deters the timely reporting, acknowledgement, and ultimate resolution of technical safety concerns, end quote. However, DOE's implementation plan identified only 4 underlying causes of the issues that led to the recommendation. 1, DOE's failure to establish expectations for safety culture. 2, the inadequate migration of unintended impacts on culture during shifts in project execution phases. 3, the need for DOE and contractor managers to acquire more knowledge and awareness of safety culture. And 4, ineffective technical issues resolution and communication at WTP. None of these underlying causes directly address the board's concern about management behaviors reinforcing subcultures that act counter to good nuclear safety practices. Both ORP and BNI have recognized the importance of the findings from the various assessments of their safety culture. They developed improvement plans with a number of actions to address these safety culture concerns and have nearly completed implementing those actions. ORP and BNI have expended considerable effort and resources to improve their safety culture by adapting concepts and principles from other organizations. However, these actions have not been in place long enough to judge their effectiveness in addressing their respective issues. DOE conducted extent of condition reviews to determine if similar cultural weaknesses existed at other defense nuclear facilities and projects. Those assessments were conducted using one of 2 approaches. The same independent expert team that was used for the WTP reviews was used for the review of major defense nuclear facility construction projects. In contrast, self-assessments were conducted by sites with defense nuclear facilities and associated federal offices. The independent assessment team identified issues with the safety culture of the projects. Additionally, the team conducted assessments of the Pantex plant and selected DOE headquarters elements, where they also identified significant issues. DOE's senior leadership has recognized the importance of these issues. The primary focus of the self-assessments was on whether a safety-conscious work environment existed at each site and not on the broader safety culture concerns raised by the board. The recommendation did not tie the extent of condition reviews to the state of the safety-conscious work environment at each site. By limiting the scope of these reviews, the question of whether the board's broader safety culture concerns were occurring at other sites was not addressed. The self-assessments lacked meaningful guidance and expectation, and the assessment teams did not have adequate training. This had a significant detrimental impact on most of the self-assessments. In contrast, the independent assessments demonstrated that the application of consistent and appropriate tools and techniques, along with qualified and experienced team members, yielded meaningful and workable results. Some of the self-assessment reports clearly demonstrated the thoughtful, self-critical, and introspective mindset required to make this type of assessment successful. However, a high frequency of confirmation bias was observed in most of the reports. Confirmation bias in such assessments creates situations where valid safety culture and safety-conscious work environment concerns may be overlooked or ignored because such observations do not fit within the assessment team's perception of that organization. DOE directed that sites with defense nuclear facilities develop plans to assure sustainment of a robust safety culture, but gave them the flexibility to select tools suitable to the specific conditions at their site. As with the self-assessments, the lack of meaningful guidance, expectation, and training had significant detrimental impact on the overall quality and usefulness of the sustainment plans. Again, some of the individual plans displayed very good understanding of the issues that needed to be addressed at the site, and they presented well-thought-out approaches to addressing those issues. Consistent with our analysis, DOE's independent safety culture assessment team identified similar concerns regarding the effectiveness of self-assessments and the weaknesses associated with the sustainment plans during their oversight of those activities. In summary, the implementation plan has essentially been completed. DOE has characterized safety culture issues at WTP and continues to implement corrective actions. DOE has completed extent of condition reviews that identified issues at other DOE defense nuclear facilities. The board staff will continue to monitor the status of these issues as part of our routine oversight. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to testify today, and that concludes my testimony.
Thank you, Dr. Bullen. So you indicated that one of the key reasons why the board issued this recommendation was because of management's behavior reinforcing a subculture at WTP that deterred the timely reporting, acknowledgement, and ultimate resolution of issues. Then I heard you, if I understood you correctly, the implementation plan for the recommendation didn't squarely address that. And it's one of the weaknesses that you saw in the implementation plan. Nevertheless, my question to you is whether or not our staff has been able to assess whether or not management behavior today still encourages behavior, still has the wrong behavior, which encourages the wrong results. We've been able to assess that?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Sullivan. Actually, it's a very complex and somewhat difficult answer. We routinely, as you know, have site representatives on the site that are observing the WTP project. We have cognizant engineers at headquarters who are also doing the same types of observations. And I would venture to say that our staff has sort of a non-unanimous or a mixed result on that. In some cases, they've seen improvement. And in some cases, it's difficult to determine if we have enough information to see that the types of behaviors no longer exist. And so we have a mixed answer or a mixed message. And that is, I don't know if we have enough information to definitively give you a positive yes or a definitive no.
So you can't say for like their site reps who live here and work here, every day and have for the last several years, they don't have an answer to this question?
Again, as I talk to the site reps and I talk to our cognizant engineers, I got somewhat of a mixed message. In some cases, they see improvement. In some cases, they see that there may be cases where there's a potential for the behavior to still exist. So it's a
Okay.
mixed message.
But in 2011, the board clearly came up with the determination that there was definitely problems with management behavior. Now I'm hearing, well, maybe not.
There may not be enough information to say maybe not or maybe so. So it's still up in the air in the eyes of the staff.
I guess my question to you is, why don't we have enough information? I mean, we live here every day. 2 people live here every day, and you have a group of engineers who come out here to do reviews frequently. We don't have enough information?
That's correct. No, we have information, but we get mixed messages is the bottom line.
I'm clearly getting a mixed message right now.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, you are. Sorry.
All right. I don't have any other questions for Dr. Bullen. Do you?
No, I do not, Mr. Sullivan.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time, and per the board's practice, and as stated in the Federal Register notice, we will welcome comments from interested members of the public. A list of those speakers who have contacted the board is posted at the entrance to this room. We have generally listed the speakers in the order in which they wish to speak. I will call the speakers in this order and ask the speakers to state their name and, if applicable, their title and organization that they are representing at the beginning of the presentation. There's also a table at the entrance to the room with a sign-up sheet for members of the public who wish to make a presentation but did not have an opportunity to notify us ahead of time. They will follow those who have already registered with us in the order in which they have today. And I understand we currently have 13 people on our list, is that correct? It's down to 12, okay. We have 12 people on our list. To give everyone wishing to speak, to make a presentation an equal opportunity, we ask that speakers limit their presentation to 5 minutes. And I'd point out, I just did the quick math. If it's 5 minutes, everybody, we're here at least an hour. The chair will then give consideration for additional comments should time permit. Presentation should be limited to comments, technical information, or data concerning the subject of this public hearing. The board members may question anyone making a presentation to the extent they deem appropriate. And with that, we are about to begin. We thank all the members of the public who have come here and been part of this discussion today, and those who are about to provide comment. And my first person on the list is Mayor Stephen Young. Mayor Young, are you here?
Well, thank you. In order to keep this brief, I'll just read from my short testimony here. As the Vice Chairman of my name is Steve Young, Mayor of the City of Kennewick. As the Vice Chairman of the Energy Communities Alliance, Vice Chairman of the Hanford Communities, but more importantly, the Mayor of the City of Kennewick, which is located just 17 miles from the Hanford site, I want to thank the members of the DNFSB for the opportunity to testify this evening regarding the safety culture at the waste treatment plant. The issue of safety at the waste treatment plant for us is of the utmost importance, especially to the citizens of the city of Kennewick, as well as the 3 other cities and 2 counties that make up the primary population affected by the work performed at the Hanford site. Now, as an elected official, I think it's important to understand that we see ourselves, the citizens, as the primary customer of the cleanup mission at Hanford. We stand to have the greatest loss if safety is ever compromised. And unsafe conditions affect our constituents, our agriculture, our tourism, and just as important, our workers. Therefore, the 4 cities and 2 counties are dramatically affected by all of DOE's cleanup operations at Hanford. These effects can be and are clearly mitigated by stability, and we need and expect stability in the waste treatment plant work planning, stability in the waste treatment plant workforce, stability in contracting at all levels, and stability in both DOE and prime contractor leadership. As a community leader, I have had the unique opportunity to closely observe both the Office of River Protection and Bechtel National Incorporated, and can say that they have made major improvements in many areas, including professionalism, work relationships, work planning, communication with the workforce, and most importantly, communication with our communities, all of which has led and continues to lead to a more stable and confident community where workers, their families, and companies want to remain long after this site has been cleaned up and new industry has emerged. From my observations, things have really changed over the past 2 years. Concerned employees and whistleblowers seem to have pretty much disappeared. What we see now are legacy cases from the past, which are now making the news as they're brought to closure. ORP and BNI appear to see a common purpose, holding events like the Grand Challenge competitions to encourage creative ideas for improving safety and efficiency throughout the project. Both ORP and BNI leadership have embraced and rewarded employees for identifying safety issues, and in fact go so far as to encourage the identification of these issues. This is the kind of safety culture, behavior, and attitude we need to get the WTP completed, operating, and the waste tanks emptied, closed, and put to bed once and for all. We as a community have waited a long time for this positive safety culture at the WTP. And as a mayor, I have waited a long time not to receive those late evening or weekend calls by frustrated or even frightened workers who believe that nobody was watching out for their best interest. From the employees, workers, and family members within the community that I come in contact with, they universally tell me that ORP, BNI, and WRPS have the right leadership, and the culture is dramatically better and headed in a very good direction. So I implore you, as a customer, and representing the more than 75,000 customers that live within my city, to keep this culture moving forward, to ensure the protection of the workforce, and to encourage efficiencies in the planning, construction, and operation of the WTP. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The next person on the list is Dawn Wellman.
Good evening. I am Dr. Dawn Wellman. I manage the environmental health and remediation market for Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. I'm pleased to be able to share insights on PNNL's experience supporting the mission to process Hanford tank waste and the ORP WTP safety culture. PNNL has provided continuous support to the Hanford site mission for over 50 years. Throughout this time, PNNL has maintained the necessary core competencies to serve the enduring technical entity and provide the scientific and technical leadership necessary to address complex challenges that have limited progress in waste processing, environmental remediation, and increased life cycle costs for long-term stewardship. However, throughout this history, we as the Hanford Site National Laboratory have experienced varying degrees of engagement in resolving the technical problems that challenge the progress of Hanford mission. During the early 90s, PNNL was the primary partner in the development of long-term solutions to reduce the risks and costs of the EM mission. In the late 90s and early 2000s, DOEM transitioned from using the national laboratories as strategic partners of long-term research and development to a role of limited engagement for the resolution of challenges to enable the baseline. In the late 2000s, a further change was realized wherein the national laboratories were nearly completely removed from supporting the EM mission. Over the past several years, we have experienced a re-engagement of the national laboratories by DOE EM, the Hanford site offices, and the site contractors, and we have been involved as strategic partners across all elements of technology development and maturation, ranging from solving critical technical issues limiting baseline to conducting analyses of maturation of technologies to provide alternatives to the baseline, and to conducting long-term research and development for solutions that can reduce lifecycle costs and risks of cleanup. As an example, on December 17, 2010, the DNFSB issued Recommendation 2010-2, pulse jet mixing, at the Waste Treatment and Immobilization Plant. In response, ORP engaged a team made up of the waste treatment plant contractor, national laboratories, industry experts, and academic scholars to develop technical solutions through large-scale testing with simulants representative of the complete range of Hanford waste properties, and establish risk management strategies for technical and safety-related risks that remained unresolved in 2010. Throughout this process, ORP and BNI leadership has exhibited strong commitment by management and staff to resolve the technical issues and has been intimately engaged with the technical team. ORP and BNI leadership has not only been accepting but encouraging of differing technical opinions and have pursued engineering studies to evaluate possible alternatives that could realize improvements by changes in the WTP design. An example is an alternatives engineering study that is evaluating the performance improvements possible by using standard design for all vessels that will be handling high solid content waste in the pretreatment facility. The testing and design efforts evaluated pulse jet mixer design elements, including the number and radial positions of pulse jet mixers, the drive velocities and volume of liquid to exchange in each pulse, and many other factors. In our role as the Hanford Site National Laboratory, Pacific Northwest National Laboratory has observed firsthand a strong commitment by the ORP and BNI management and staff to safely resolve technical issues and ensure that design efforts on the WTP facility can proceed in a manner that is safe and functional for the long-term vitrification of Hanford waste. We greatly appreciate the current approach by DOEM and specifically leadership from the Hanford site offices and contractors to utilize PNNL and the enduring historic knowledge and scientific and technical experts that continue to remain essential to the success of the Hanford mission. Thank you.
And thank you. Next on my list, I actually have two names signed up on the same line, Carol Adrian and Gary Peterson. If they're going to both speak or just one or the other.
Yes, thank you. I'm speaking for Carl Adrian and myself. And first I want to say thank you, Gary Peterson, Vice President of TRIDAC, and thank you for having this meeting and also for having me up at the front. At my age, 74 3/4, this is almost my bedtime, as some people in here know, so I appreciate it. Jesse, I also welcome you back to the Tri-Cities. It's very nice to see you. I also sit on the Hanford Hammer Steering Committee and Executive Board, so Glenn Podolsky, I want to say thank you to you as well for your support for Hammer. With that, I'll enter the comments. Let me just point out, too, there's another unusual feature about my job, and that is I'm only the second person to hold this job, and I've held it now for 13 years. The predecessor held it for almost 50, and that was Sam Volpentest. He had the nerve to die at 101, and he'd still be here if he hadn't passed on. So, TRIDAC last testified before the DNFSB in 2012. At that meeting, we stated that TRIDAC and our community does have confidence in DOE's Office of River Protection and in Bechtel's leadership on construction of the waste treatment plant. We continue to have confidence in these organizations, and the ensuing 3 years, from 2012 to 2015, have further solidified our belief that progress is being made, safety is of prime importance throughout the site, and employees who may have safety or other concerns are being heard. The mantra of whistleblowers has, in essence, disappeared over the last 3 years because ORP and BNI leadership have created an atmosphere where issues are brought forward openly, discussed openly, and brought to the resolution that is satisfactory to the employees. If I may, though, for just a few minutes, I want to get more personal in my remarks. For an understanding of why I feel the need to get personal, let me tell you that I have lived in the Tri-Cities since 1965. And that's a longer period than some people in the room, but not everybody. My wife has lived here since 1944. And so I drink the water that comes from the Columbia River immediately downstream from the Hanford site. I think most people in the room know that the city of Richland is the only major municipality located downstream of Hanford that uses Columbia River water for its potable water source. Well, you have and will hear from what I call watchdog organizations and individuals who do not live in the Tri-Cities. I can assure you that after 50 years of living next to Hanford and working all across Hanford site, and the constant relative to Hanford cleanup, and the safety issues at Hanford, the constant is the people who live in our community and who live in Richland. Who has the most to gain or lose from actions taken by DOE and the prime contractors, or even you on the DNFSB? I assure you, it is the individuals like myself and my family who live in our community. It is not the people who don't live here and never will. While I retired from the National Laboratory in 2002, I have continued to work for TRIDEC, and now I have worked for TRIDEC for 13 full years. My job at Hanford is singularly focused on Hanford and the National Laboratory. I have previously, however, worked in a variety of jobs across the Hanford site for nearly 50 years. I can almost guarantee you, not quite, but almost guarantee you, the members of the Defense Nuclear Safety Facility Board, that there is no other individual other than those who work regularly at Hanford who goes to Hanford more frequently than I do. I'm going to say that again. I don't think there's anybody other than the workers at Hanford who goes to Hanford more often than I do. Just last week, I helped escort 13 congressional staff members on a full-day tour of Hanford, and this was the 18th year that TRIDEC has sponsored that particular trip. Congressional staff ask difficult questions. You don't try and hide anything from them, and they keep coming back. I know personally that Kevin Smith, Stacy Charbonneau, the DOE managers of ORP and RL, and I also know that the prime contractor managers, like Peggy sitting over here on my left, and a number of other managers that work for them and their workers are really concerned about safety. Why do I say this? I'm convinced that our contractors and DOE want to clean up Hanford. They want the waste treatment plant to be completed and to operate as designed. They want the tanks emptied of all nuclear waste and the sludge removed from K-Basin. And they want to do this as safely as possible. There is not a single manager that I know of that doesn't want their entire workforce to return at home at night in the same health as when they came to work in the morning. These are not individuals who are trying to cut corners, increase risks, or build facilities that won't work. To me, my wife, 2 daughters, 6 grandchildren, I and my neighbors want Hanford cleaned up. I ask for your help, that of the DNFSB, to do this, not with impediments along the way, but with recommendations and oversight that gets the job done safely, efficiently, and without burdening the work being done with requirements that are simply outside the realm of possibility. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Next name on the list is Cliss McNeil.
Good evening. I can appreciate that it's almost past my bedtime too, so thank you. My name is Cliss McNeil. I'm the Director of Environmental Safety and Health for Washington River Protection Solutions. My affiliations are with AECOM, and that's a LLC company operated by AECOM and Energy Solutions. I'd like to thank the board for the opportunity to talk tonight. I want to say just a few words concerning some of the initiatives that we have going on within AECOM that are also affecting what we're doing at WTP. I've spent most of my career, all 38 years, in environmental safety and health. I've been on many of the nuclear sites here in the U.S., and I've just returned about a year ago from Sellafield in the U.K., and I was really glad to come back to someplace warm and sunny, and so Hanfordite, here I am. Thank you very much. Some of the insights that I've gained over the last 38 years are that the safety culture, as we call it, is really a three-legged stool, if you will. It's leadership, organizational learning, and communications. But within that, the leadership leg of the stool has many elements. And I found that the absolutely key to that is the senior managers walking the talk. At WCH, at WRPS, and now at WTP, I see senior managers not only walking around, but listening. They're listening to what the individuals are saying. They're listening to the employees. And when they observe and see things and they're being told things, they fix those things. It's very, very important. So they're walking the talk. At WTP, the management team participates in the observation, evaluation, and improvement of safety using senior supervisory watch reports, management observation checklists. Project directors, management teams are routinely in the work areas. They're talking to the individuals. They're walking the talk. The communication leg of the stool not only consists of this effective communication, but most importantly, effective listening. Effective listening leads to employee engagement, which is a cornerstone of any strong nuclear safety culture. At AECOM, we recently conducted an employee engagement survey that included WTP, and the employees stated our work areas are safe, we can raise concerns and corrective actions are taken, and good safety performance is recognized. This is a positive indication of our culture and where we're going. Finally, the organizational learning leg of the stool at AECOM sites, including WTP, consists of things like classroom on-the-job training. We have this wonderful facility in Hammer that I think is one of a kind in the world. But beyond that, it's really operational experience, sharing OPEX, understanding what we're doing as far as hazard identification, hazard recognition, work package reviews, including the employees working those down with you, and performance monitoring and assurance conduct to make sure that we've got the oversight that we need and that it's in place. The second major lesson I've learned about safety culture development is that no nuclear project or site is an island. It's a fundamental mistake in building a safety culture to go it alone, to try and tackle the task without outside help. At Sellafield, WCH, WRPS, Idaho, wherever we've been, we've sought the advice and counsel of the parent companies, other nuclear sites, regulators, oversight groups, and industry experts. At WTP, we're doing the same, plus supporting their safety culture improvement efforts through the use of corporate subject matter experts, site expertise, outside experts, and via our internal functional coordination teams. The third and final major lesson I've learned in safety culture development is that complacency is the enemy. Sustaining the safety culture requires vigilance, and it doesn't happen overnight, and we've brought that up a couple of times. To combat complacency at the projects and sites we operate, we perform the following: observation programs such as craft-based safety observations, quality programs, ISMS certifications, environmental management, ISO certifications, voluntary protection program, leading lagging metrics and dashboards such as the Project Help dashboard at WTP, improvement programs, infusion of new talent. And, you know, we still, with pride in this industry, at WRPS, we're taking the safety culture monitoring panel that was developed at WTP, and we're now incorporating that into our site to try and grow that culture within us. So the big question that we've all been listening to tonight is the safety culture improvement efforts at WTP working? We've talked a lot about the surveys. We've talked about a lot of the interviews that have been conducted. I believe that we're on the right trajectory. I believe that the results from those are leading us down the right path. We've got to stay the course. We've got to not get complacent along the way, and that we will get there. Just a couple of things we haven't talked about. I had the opportunity of being at the VPP National Conference this week, and on Sunday, there were 3 sites from Hanford that received the Star of Excellence Award: WCH, WRPS, and WTP. And that's not just about safety stats, although it's really important to me that everybody goes home the way they came to work. It's also about what we're doing in the communities, our outreach programs, and our mentoring. That is key. And I appreciate the comments from the local community that's been given as well. So thank you again for providing me the opportunity to speak about safety culture improvement at WTP. We're committed to continuously improving the safety culture at WTP and at all of our other nuclear project sites. And as I've discussed, I think we're making progress and will continue to push forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McNeil. Next name is Pam Larson.
Hello, I'm Pam Larson, and I'm the Executive Director of the Hanford Communities Organization, which is an interlocal organization comprised of the cities and counties that surround the Hanford site. I've served in this job for 21 years. I've also been a member of the Hanford Advisory Board for 21 years. We are not term limited here, but I'm not speaking to you this evening as a HAB member. First of all, I want to express our appreciation for the enormous progress that has been made with the cleanup of the Hanford site and the Department of Energy's commitment to be sure that work is done safely. For those of us who live in this region, maintaining the pristine quality of water in the Columbia River is essential. We draw our drinking water from the river, we swim and fish in the river, As we diversify our economy away from Hanford, growing our food processing industry, agriculture, healthcare, and the wine industry, we must be assured that our environment is safe and the water quality remains high. For those reasons, it is imperative that the Department of Energy continue to empty tanks and build the extraordinarily complex waste treatment plant. We're very encouraged with the DOE framework plan for an early start of the law facility. We need tank waste treatment as soon as possible. The direct feed law approach will ensure that waste fed to the law melters meets specifications. In starting up law early, it will also provide additional tank capacity so that waste can continue to be pumped from tanks that are leaking or may leak in the future. This added flexibility is crucial. We are encouraged that ORP has resumed full production engineering of the HLW facility, and we hear they may soon authorize full construction, or they may do so within the next year or so. The Hanford communities endorsed the construction of a blending and conditioning facility to provide waste feed to WTP that meets waste acceptance criteria. As you're aware, the Department of Energy and the state of Washington are engaged in a dispute about cleanup progress under the federal consent decree. The federal judge has held 2 hearings about the dispute in our community. I have attended both, and I've listened to the attorneys for both sides express their positions. The judge has asked a compelling question: what has changed since you agreed to the conditions in the decree? It is important to note that one of the answers is that the Defense Board has continued to revise what you think is acceptable and manageable risk. Studies have been undertaken at significant cost that have delayed the progress on the project. Tanks have continued to degrade and increase the risk to our region. To my knowledge, the studies that have been undertaken have largely validated the path forward. In order to avoid further delays, we ask that you please get any remaining concerns on the table now so that ORP can complete design and resume full construction of WTP. We need tank waste treatment as soon as possible. Because of the litigation with the state, DOE attorneys excuse me, have restricted the information that ORP can share with the public, leaving an impression that progress is not being made. The Hanford communities have had the unique opportunity to closely observe both ORP and BNI, and we can say that things have dramatically improved, including professionalism, working relationships, mission planning, technical issue resolution, and the integration between tank farms and WTP. New people have been brought in to leadership positions who are providing strong direction, and they're reaching out to workers, encouraging them to share ideas and concerns. We believe they are taking the necessary steps to make the WTP plant operational and safe. I've had the opportunity to tour vitrification plants at Sellafield, La Hague, and Savannah River. At each of those facilities, they have continued to refine their processes as they've been treating waste. We can do the same. All possible questions that could be answered do not need to be fully answered before the plant begins operation. Any first-of-a-kind facility needs to learn from experience. It's time to start. I would like to speak briefly about the outstanding progress that has been made in decommissioning and demolition activities at the highly contaminated plutonium finishing plant. DOE expects to meet their milestone and have demolition complete in 2016. This has been a difficult project involving extremely dangerous materials. We're very encouraged by the work that has been done and the focus on safety. This evening, I want to express our appreciation for the highly trained scientists, engineers, technical staff, and the remarkable workers that do the hard tasks of cleaning up Hanford. The work they do is difficult, stressful, and the materials some of them encounter are very hazardous. We honor them and sincerely appreciate their efforts, which are improving our environment, remediating risks, and putting us in a position to move forward with a vision for a clean energy generation, new jobs, and a future no longer tied to Hanford. We are encouraged by the continuous improvements in the safety culture and the increased confidence the workforce has that they can raise questions and concerns about the work they're doing. My impression from friends and acquaintances who work at WTP is that the culture is healthy. There are a number of organizations that seem to love negative press about Hanford. We have found this frustrating and distracting from the important issues that need to be discussed. There's much more cleanup to be accomplished. We look forward to continued public dialogue about this work remaining, not just the issues that generate headlines designed to sell papers, garner donations, and scare the heck out of the public.
Ms. Larson,
Concluding, excuse me?
Good. I was going to ask you to please conclude.
Okay.
Thank you.
For those of us who live in this beautiful region and the extraordinary workforce who engaged in cleanup, we would like to point out that work is getting done, progress is being made, and technical decisions are being answered. The cleanup of Hanford is investment worthy. It will benefit the entire Pacific Northwest, both environmentally and economically. We share with you the common goal of safely treating waste. The risk of not doing so is real. The concept of zero risk in treating waste must be balanced with a timely, cost-effective, and aggressive approach to get the cleanup done. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for the opportunity for public comment.
Thank you, Ms. Larson. Keith Klein.
Keith Klein. I'm here representing myself as a citizen of the community. I, in fact, know probably most of the people in this room. I spent 8 years as the manager of the Richland Operations Office. Prior to that, I had the privilege of working for Ms. Roberson at Rocky Flats, and was dispatched to get WIP open, and we succeeded in doing that, and have done a number of good things, starting going back to the Atomic Energy Commission. But I'm speaking here just as behalf as a citizen of the Tri-Cities, since retiring 8 years ago from DOE. I've been a consultant and working various tasks. Through that, been able to maintain contact with many people in the workforce, from the workers live next door to me to the senior managers. And Gary Peterson stole most of what I intended to say about us wanting to get on with the cleanup here, but there's one observation that I guess I would share at this point that I don't think has been said, and that goes back to the schedule and budget pressures and the impacts that have had on a number of things that have happened here in the past. I think starting with the whole design-build contract, where the design engineering got ahead of the safety analysis, and a lot of that was in response to pressures to meet deadlines that were set in the tri-party agreement and other things. You know, people want to please. They did what they could, but eventually that got caught up. In that process, I would observe that decisions seemed to be made in a rather closed environment. They were not transparent how they were made, who was making them, on what basis. As a result of the Defense Board recommendation and other things, I think there's obviously been a lot more attention, care, and caution that is now being used in the decision-making process. And as a virtue of knowing the people here, I can honestly say that you can't find a more dedicated, competent, hard-working group of people. I trust them. I know they want to get on with doing work. So I hope you will see the goodness and improvements in the processes that have been made, and with that, we'll be able to get on with getting the job done here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Klein. Jean St. Pierre.
Good evening. My name is Gene St. Pierre. I'm an independent consultant for the nuclear industry, and I'm here representing myself. Just a little bit about my background, because I think it'll help frame the context of what I have to offer. I was a former site vice president at commercial nuclear power industry. I was a former corporate vice president where we had 8 reactors at 5 different sites, and was responsible for all aspects of operations, including corrective action programs and safety culture. I also spent some time at the World Association of Nuclear Operators, which is commonly known as WANO. WANO conducts assessments at nuclear facilities around the world to ensure that they're operated safely. I was involved with a post-Fukushima assessment and some corporate evaluations, notably Tokyo Electric, who was the operator of Fukushima. And the major focus on these assessments dealt with corrective actions and safety culture. Because of my background, I was asked by Bechtel to be part of the independent team to assess the adequacy of their management improvement plan, which is commonly known as MIP. This assessment was approximately 18 months ago, and this was my first exposure to the Hanford Reservation. So I really got a cold, hard look, indoctrination, if you will, to the organization. I returned about a month ago at the request of Bechtel to conduct an independent assessment of their corrective action program, which is one element of their management improvement plan. Thus, my insights span 18 months. First, I want to just talk about what a corrective action program is, just so everyone's clear. A corrective action program serves the purpose of documenting deficiencies and areas for improvement in a systematic and formal way, and then these deficiencies and improvement areas are tracked for resolution. A robust and healthy corrective action plans are an important element for the safety culture in any facility or industry that deals with potentially hazardous materials. Thus, the assessment of the corrective action program provided a window of opportunity for me to view the safety culture at the waste treatment plant. So, my perspective 18 months ago was that Bechtel's corrective action program was less than effective. It was not valued by the Bechtel organization. That is, it was not considered part of their core business. And I believe these inadequacies helped contribute to a strained nuclear safety culture at the site at that time. So we fast forward now 18 months to now, and it's a completely different story. Today, the corrective action program, I believe, is valued and it is considered core business. And this is after multiple interviews of individuals where you really can test their belief, if you will, in the value of a corrective action program. This transformation, in my opinion, has had a great positive impact on the safety culture at the waste treatment plant. Today, I believe there is a degree of confidence that if an issue is discovered, people believe there is a sound mechanism for documenting the issue and there will be resolution to the issue. It will not be forgotten or lost, thus a positive effect on safety culture. I'd just like to make a comment on leadership. To have positive change of this magnitude, the leadership at Bechtel and the Department of Energy Office of River Protection should be commended. In all my experiences, both domestically and internationally, I'd be hard-pressed to find a comparable example of such rapid change. That said, there is no perfect corrective action program that exists in the world. The key to a healthy, robust corrective action program and safety culture is to continuously work to improve the programs. That effort will never end. And I also believe the programmatic pillars for sustainability are embedded in the processes at the waste treatment plant. And those pillars are, there's governance, in other words, procedures and policies that embed the corrective action program so it will continue to function. The roles and accountabilities are strong, and the oversight, both internal and external, will ensure that those programs continue. Thus, if you believe the corrective action program is going to continue to be effective, then it has a positive effect on safety culture as well. And I would like to make one last comment too, and it was talked extensively during the discussions this evening, leadership. The strong leadership must continue as it has been over the last 18 months, both by Office of River Protection and Bechtel. And this concludes my comments, and I'd like to thank the board the time to speak.
Thank you, Mr. St. Pierre. Thomas Yout.
Mr. Sullivan and Mrs. Roberson, thanks for your time tonight to speak. My name is Thomas Yunt, and I'm an Executive Vice President with Energy Solutions, and I run the local office here and have been around the Hanford site in or around since 1986. I've had the privilege to see a lot of great leadership teams come and go in and out of the Tri-Cities area. And I can attest that the current leadership at DOE and the waste treatment plant and WRPS are working together to do the right things and to be inclusive of workers and their ideas and concerns along the way. Personnel from my organization have performed a variety of work on the WTP project over the last 10 years. This includes work out at the WTP construction site and working side by side with the WTP staff over the most recent last 2-year period. We have also been the test execution organization completing the pulse-jet mixing trials over the last several years, and most recently at the test facility at the WSU Tri-City campus. We've also performed a significant amount of engineering and test work demonstrating both the high-level waste and the low-active waste melter technology employed at the waste treatment plant. And we've demonstrated it to be safe, reliable, and effective. In all instances, I have seen firsthand that the workforce and the line management people our organization interfaces with take seriously concerns for safety and quality and have always taken the time to get things done right. Sometimes, even if it takes a little longer or costs a little more, getting the work done right and safely has been put above all else. I strongly encourage the DNFSB to get all remaining concerns about the waste treatment plant out once and for all so that DOE can complete the design and get the pretreatment facility back to full construction as soon as possible. Nuclear safety for us is getting the waste out of tanks, get it emptied and put into safe long-term glass waste form, and is not an academic exercise that every single person has to agree with every single technical opinion along the way. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Tom Carpenter.
Hello. Thank you for inviting public comment tonight. My name is Tom Carpenter. I'm the executive director of an organization called Hanford Challenge. And I've been coming out to the Hanford site off and on since 1987. Worked with a number of employees and whistleblowers and workers at the site in various ways over the years. Tonight I wanted to make just a few comments about what I didn't hear discussed that I think should have been discussed, and also to make a few comments about safety culture. And one is, organizations are, in essence, Darwinian, right? And so notice who isn't here tonight. In 2010, DNFSB did hold a hearing, and before you sat a panel of people, including the manager of environmental and nuclear safety, and her name was Donna Bushy. And she testified in a manner that was a bit shocking, I think, to the board and to her peers around her. She talked about deposition velocity and other technical matters that, in her professional experience, raised concerns about the safety of the plant. And she is not here today. She's not sitting before you testifying because she was terminated. That fact has not been discussed tonight, or that others have also been terminated. So the organization has purged itself. And we heard Mr. Smith here talk about how nuclear safety concerns have largely gone a lot smoother without Donna there. Well, maybe people aren't raising those concerns in this, in the same way, certainly, and maybe you need to hear those kind of concerns. So I think it's important that the board know that last Thursday, I received an email, and the board was also CC'd on this email. Don't know if you got it or not, from a WTP engineer, and he wrote, "I've worked at WTP for many years. I've been deeply concerned about the safety culture. It has not improved. It is the worst I have ever seen. Never in my long professional career have I seen anything that even resembles the deceit and lack of integrity that I have seen here. I have raised issues and solutions, and in my opinion, I've been retaliated against. As an engineer, it is my job to fix things, but under the current environment, that is not possible without risking my livelihood and further retaliation. I apologize for the obscurity of this email, but if I were found out that I were even thinking about telling the truth or bringing up these issues, I would be looking for another job. I've been waiting for months for the Department of Energy to issue the attached report, which was disclosed this morning, but this upcoming public meeting has prompted me to get the word out. I'm disappointed in the lack of transparency and leadership that the DOE has demonstrated in this regard. Some of these issues, if not resolved, will result in millions of dollars of cost to the taxpayer and could possibly result in injuries to future workers. This is simply unacceptable. I wish we had a culture that would allow me to talk freely and openly. So there's at least one person out there who feels a little differently than what you've heard tonight. And I can attest that there are a few others out there who also feel very strongly, who aren't here tonight and don't feel like it's safe to stick their head up and talk about what's going on. What's not talked about tonight, there have been 4 OSHA decisions in the last year validating Hanford whistleblower concerns in the last year alone. There have been 3 disclosures to the Office of Special Counsel by DOE federal employees at Hanford about waste, fraud, and abuse and alleged retaliation from this site, from federal workers. Recently, in the last couple of years, there have been 2 Senate hearings about whistleblower terminations. There was a DOE IG investigation that was initiated by the Secretary of Energy after one of those Senate hearings. That investigation was shut down because of lack of cooperation from the contractors. No accountability there. They just didn't make a decision. That was supposed to look into the circumstances of Donna Bushy's termination. Similarly, one of your recommendations in 2011-1 was to look into the circumstances of the termination of Dr. Tamasitis in 2010. And that investigation was never conducted. I don't know why not, but there was never any follow-up on that. So in 2013, there was a memo issued by Dr. Moniz affirming a safety culture, and several weeks later, Dr. Tamasitis was terminated. A couple of months later, Donna Bushy was terminated. So the memo maybe didn't have the desired effect other than high-profile terminations of people. And I would submit to you that that is a much stronger message than any memo, poster, paycheck insert, or training session that a worker might receive out there. It's going to be the behaviors that inform people about what is safe and what is not safe. And that was missing from the discussion tonight. And as long as you have those examples out there, then people aren't going to believe the training. They're not going to believe the payroll inserts or the memos that come out. That's mostly what I heard tonight, is we've got memos. So I want you to reconsider some of the evidence that's out there and discuss it, and maybe consider having some OSHA people up here to discuss, or whistleblowers, people who are on the receiving end of the system. Thanks for considering my comments tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. Next, I have Dawn Wellman speaking for Stephen Ashby. That's what's written down. So, Ms. Wellman, you've had your 5 minutes, so I just want to be clear. You're speaking for someone else right now?
Speaking on behalf of Dr. Stephen Ashby, Director of Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. I wish to affirm my commitment to the partnership we have developed and underscore the laboratory's continued support in providing scientifically defensible solutions to the challenges at the Hanford site. I know that we are committed to the success of the Hanford mission and for ensuring the safety of those executing that mission. As mentioned earlier, P&L has supported the Hanford mission and site operations for more than 50 years. We have developed considerable expertise in areas central to the cleanup efforts, and we are proud of our many contributions. We also feel a sense of shared responsibility for the future. After all, we and our families live in this community. It should be no surprise that we are fully supportive of the need to remediate the site as quickly and cost-effectively as possible. Institutionally, our scientific roots lie within the original Hanford site mission. Before we became a national lab, we were the site laboratory providing the scientific and technical expertise needed to develop the chemical and engineering processes to address the tank waste at West Valley, Savannah River, and Hanford. As the site mission progressed, we contributed to the development and treatment processes being implemented today. Over time, the site mission evolved and PNNL grew into a multi-program national laboratory. During these transitions, there was a period in which we were not engaged in the maturation of technology and development of next-generation solutions needed to reduce the cost and risk of the Hanford mission. I am pleased to say this is no longer the case. DOE, the site offices, contractor, and national laboratory leadership have worked collaboratively to reinvigorate our working relationships around a common goal of solving one of the nation's most important cleanup challenges. Over the past few years, we have seen a change in how the Hanford site offices and site contractors approach engaging the national labs. We are once again viewed as strategic partners in the cleanup mission. It is recognized that we are at our best when working on the most difficult technical problems, especially those that will require a sustained effort over many years. We are encouraged to raise concerns openly, and they are debated without fear of reprisal. As a result of this renewed engagement, PNNL is working on mission-critical challenges to enable today's baseline. We are also conducting analyses and maturing technologies to provide alternatives to that baseline that reduce the risks and costs of cleanup for tomorrow. For example, PNNL is currently leading and contributing expertise to help integrated teams of Bechtel National and PNNL experts to resolve the technical issues of mixing, criticality, and flammable gas retention. These issues, identified by then Secretary of Energy Stephen Chu, must be resolved in order to resume design and construction of the waste treatment plant. Additionally, PNNL is developing new glass formulations and alternative processing approaches that enable significant improvements in waste loading while still meeting both processing and product performance constraints. Developing glasses that are more tolerant to key waste components not only provides a technical basis for increasing waste loading and ultimately decreasing canister production counts, but also provides opportunities to minimize or eliminate certain pretreatment options. The integrated program is focused on reducing the overall WTP mission life and cost by increasing waste throughput for WTP facility operations. In closing, we greatly appreciate the renewed emphasis on partnership with PNNL by DOE in general and by leadership at the Office of River Protection in particular. The decision to more fully utilize PNNL's historic knowledge as well as our world-leading expertise to help provide solutions to long-term scientific and technical challenges is essential to the success of the Hanford mission. We look forward to continuing this productive partnership well into the future.
Thank you. Mr. Tim Feth.
Hi, I'm Tim Feth. I'm a legal intern with Hanford Challenge. I just have 2 quick points. The first is that we at Hanford Challenge don't agree that the safety culture assessment reflects a shift in the safety culture at the WTP. There are a number of reasons to feel this way. I'll just touch on a few of them briefly. First, there was a low response rate of the employees at Bechtel. The changes measured at ORP, according to the assessment, were statistically insignificant. Several key questions were reworded from prior assessments. There were less independent oversights than prior assessments. And finally, we feel that there wasn't enough meaningful data included in the assessment. And by that, I'm mostly referring to the fact that the assessment relies heavily on averages as opposed to telling us specifically how many people do or don't agree with a given statement. So in short, we feel that the assessment as published doesn't reflect any change in safety culture at the WTP. We can't really draw any viable conclusions from the assessment. The second point that I want to make is that treatment of whistleblowers is an important part of safety culture, even if those whistleblowers are these so-called legacy whistleblowers, these cases from the past. Current treatment of those whistleblowers does reflect current safety culture. And when a company fights a meritorious whistleblower claim, they prove to their employees what happens when people stand up for safety. And a good example of that is the case of Walt Ford. Now recently, an OSHA investigation found that Mr. Ford was retaliated against by Bechtel for raising safety concerns. And I think that demonstrates to people at Bechtel and at other Hanford, with other Hanford companies that the safety culture still is not where we want it to be. And that concludes my 2 points. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Patrick Gutner?
Patrick Gettner, thank you.
Gettner, thank you.
Members of the board, for your allowing us to speak as a public citizen. I am an American patriot, and I'm a concerned local citizen about the delay and the procrastination with this project. It's been going on for 15 years, and enough's enough. And it looks like you, members of the board, are our only last resort to get this thing going. An excellent manager once said, if you get safety and quality correct, everything else goes properly. I'm a firm believer. I've worked on many projects, and I've seen that happen time and time again. I heard a lot of motherhood and apple pie tonight. I did not hear anything about evidence of how things are improving. I did not hear anything about a lessons learned program. And I've heard all this many, many times before. So my point is, and I'll keep it short since I'm the 12th man, and makes me special kind of. I implore you, as our last resort, to get this thing right and make it happen. It's been going on for 15 years. We're continually exposed to these potential, if not manifested problems of nuclear and biological and other chemical environmental insults in this community. So I think it can be done. Yes, I've heard it's difficult, and it probably is, but it's not rocket science. We built this, the Manhattan Project finished the atomic bomb in 2.5 years, and we put a man on the moon in 7 years after JFK made the announcement. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes everybody who was on our list. Is there anyone else here who wishes to speak? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands go up. So that concludes the section of public comment. I'm going to turn now to Ms. Roberson for her closing comments.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Just briefly, I'd like to say that I appreciate that the department has taken many actions to improve WTP project safety culture in response to the board's recommendation 2011-1. However, these actions do not address the main concerns that led the board to issue the recommendation. Further, DOE can only sustain progress if senior leaders at the department embrace and continually practice the behaviors that reinforce a culture of safety within their organizations. As I learned from our previous public hearings, leaders establish the working climate, and climate drives the culture of their organization. And culture change cannot be sustained by external influences. Numerous actions have been undertaken, but the effect is still unknown. The board's recommendation was driven by concerns with current technical decision-making involving safety matters. I have reviewed the sustainment plan for the project, and it is a good plan for pursuit of an organic culture change, which we all know will take many, many years, but work and decisions are being made now. And it is unclear what the key compensatory measures are that are being relied on in the interim so that they can be sustained while the project moves forward through the many challenges that have been cited throughout the night that are still to come. Because of the complexity of this unique project, it is essential that DOE has a strong culture of safety today while it is designing and building the plant. It is even if it is not the department's desired end state. It is absolutely vital for supporting the quality and safety framework that this project requires. Thank you, Mr. Sullivan.
Thank you. So now I have some comments that are my own. I was not a member of the Defense Nuclear Facility Safety Board back in the 2010-2011 timeframe when many of the issues which led to this recommendation were coming to the forefront. So I can't speak to personal experience of what conditions were like back then. But I did come to the board in September of 2012. Shortly after I arrived, Secretary Chu basically put the brakes on this project in order to resolve technical issues. They changed the leadership out in early 2013 to install Mr. Smith and Mr. Hamill, who we heard tonight. And in early 2013, just as they were taking their job, I was here, and then I was here again in 2014 and 2015. I can tell you from my personal experience, the improvement in just the time I've spent here has been measurable, and it's palpable, just walking around. So I have seen a change in leadership, and I've also seen a change in leadership under Secretary Moniz, who has continued to put emphasis here. I believe that safety culture is first and foremost about leadership. I'm not sure that there's any program that anyone can put in place that will guarantee that we have good leaders in the future, unless you can guarantee who those particular people are going to be. Nevertheless, looking at what we are doing now, and in my discussions with our staff who regularly come out here, spend time here, I have continued to ask the question whether or not there's any indication that information is being withheld from us, and I get no indication that any information is being withheld from us. So when you look at safety culture, and you look at what oversight needs to do, there's always going to be problems. Nothing's ever going to be perfect. But my key question is, if information is not getting to us, then we can't do our job. We could not do the job we need to do in order to make sure that when this plant operates, it will operate safely. If there's no indication that we are not getting information, then I'm convinced that we will be able to do our job. So all of the indicators I get say that there has been improvement. It's been in the right direction. That doesn't mean it's perfect. And I think we need to look at this, we as a board, need to look at this not for perfection or not for zero defects, but to assure ourselves that there is no issue of adequate protection, because that's our job. Will the public be protected when this plant starts up? And the public will be protected if leadership is strong and leadership is making sure that issues are getting resolved and that no information is being hidden. So I think that's the key consideration for us to consider as we move forward in our oversight of this project and its safety culture. So that concludes my remarks. As we close this hearing, I want to reiterate that the record for the hearing will close on September 28th, 2015. If any member of the public would like the board to consider any additional statements or information on the topics presented here this evening, please mail or email them to the board by that date. This includes those individuals from the public who have viewed this hearing via live video streaming on the internet. Contact information to send in additional information can be found on the board's public website, dnfsb.gov. This concludes the hearing of the Defense Nuclear Facility Safety Board. We are now adjourned. Thank you for attending.